I didn't just come here to visit my friend and my darling niece. Lewin's words pulled her out of her reflection to see he had gotten up from his seat. He walked across the room without looking back. He then opened the door and she presumed was speaking to one of his guards before he closed the door behind him. I would not have complained. Lewin sent her a dubious look before his expression smoothed over. My nephew thought this was a matter that should not be said with ink. What message does Prince Doran wish to give? She felt the crackle of curiosity burn within her. That was when there was a knock at the door. Lewin answered it, sticking his head out, conversing softly before he closed it. This time he was holding something. It was a plain wooden box. It was no larger than a small cushion. He carried it over to the table. The box was worn and plain with no carvings or design on it. I doubt a raven could carry this. Joanna made no move to open it. She could be patient. My nephew understands the importance of our alliance with your family, Lewin informed her. Your words were concerning to him. Lewin stepped in front of her and opened the box. Prince Doran believed this was all the evidence you would require to understand his intentions. Joanna moved forward. She looked down and what she saw made her smile because she knew what it meant. Dorn will not abandon us. Prince Doran will be with us to the end. Barristan. There is no equal. He walked behind Prince Daeron, impressed at the bustling that surrounded them. It was a large town made entirely of cloth and canvas. Tents and pavilions had popped up all around the ruined castle of Harrenhal like large colored flowers. Sir Barristan. The prince called to him. Was the tournament this large when the kingdom celebrated the 50th year of King Jaehaerys' reign? He looked over his shoulder with an innocent smile. I'm forgetful in my old age, Barristan replied dryly, unable to keep his lips from twitching. Daeron chuckled, and slowed his steps so they could walk beside one another. It is remarkable, he said it in a tone that conveyed no awe. It is, he agreed, the largest I've participated in. He rode in tournaments in the reigns of 3 different kings, but none had been thrown of this size with this amount of lavish and splendor. And yet not a single northern banner has been spotted. He had noticed as well. It would seem that the entire northern nobility were stubbornly staying above the neck. There was a flurry within the mob of men and women they passed, which included bustling servants, and marching guards. It was a storm of noise and activity. There was shouting and laughter, cursing and gossiping. A pair of guards wearing the livery of House Went walked by them complaining about the latrines that had been dug for the tourney. The stenches in the trenches. On their right was the large encampment where Lord Daery was keeping his men at arms and knights. Encircling his faithful was his family's standard, a crowd of brown banners with the black ploughman rippling in the breeze. Lord Tywine had been the one who brought the largest gathering. Barristan figured the wedding between Lady Cersei and Prince Daeron must be drawing near. That he was bringing his bannermen to accompany him on a trip south to Summerhall to attend the anticipated union between the Lion and the Dragon. Prince Daeron had made no mention of a pending wedding, but he was certain the prince would not complain. His affection for his betrothed was well known. Barristan prayed that this union would be different than so many others before him. Targaryens and love, he sighed, how often has it brought unrest? How often have the kingdoms bled because of it? Prince Daemon Blackfyra loved Princess Daenerys and rose in rebellion when denied her. Bittersteel and Bloodraven had loved the same sister, Shrister, and the brothers made the 7 kingdoms bleed. Prince Duncan, the very man who had given Barristan his epithet, had put aside his own crown to marry the woman he loved. Aegon's children followed that example to marry out of love to the detriment of their father's own plans. Their vows could have been seeds that planted peace and loyalty for all of Westeros. He remembered King Aegon's hopes with the alliances he had tried to make, but instead his children's vows brought contempt and uncertainty. A dragon's love has too often brought despair and ruin. He pushed aside that sad observation, knowing it would be different with Prince Daeron and his beloved betrothed, Cersei Lannister. There is something I want to show you, Sir Barristan. He stopped just before they reached the outer curtain wall of Harrenhal. He was given a small piece of black cloth. Confused, Barristan unfurled it to see it was the 3-headed dragon of House Targaryen, but the colors were different. The heads of the dragon were red, gold, and white. The white represents you, Sir Barristan. Prince Daeron's finger tapped it. It is my way of honoring and thanking you for all that you have done to me. I am truly grateful, so there was a tightness to his tone. Barristan blinked down at the cloth in disbelief. He tried to speak, but he found a sudden swell rising in his throat. His eyes remained on the white-headed dragon. Prince Daeron, the words felt thick and clumsy in his mouth. He struggled with what to say. This was not his talent. It was his sword that had won him his acclaim. So here he found himself in a position he never would be in the sparring yard or the battlefield, off guard. You honor me. I should warn you, Sir Barristan, before you become known as Sir Barristan the boastful, that it represents Sir Gawain and Ned too. The prince's tone added some levity. You are all men I respect and rely on. I consider myself fortunate to have been your squire. He turned to face the young prince who stood taller than him. Barristan wished he could remember when that had happened. The honor was mine, Prince Daeron, he said. You are a good man with a good heart. You are a true knight and one of the best swordsmen I've ever faced, in training or fighting. I pray it's never in fighting, Sir Barristan, Prince Daeron said softly before taking the cloth back. He found that a disquieting thought and something he did not wish to dwell on. Will it be your standard for Summerhall? The prince folded it. Yes, he sounded distant, distracted before he tucked the cloth away, for Summerhall. Their presence outside the walls did not go unnoticed. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a small party that had come in the direction of where some of the Stormlords had put up their tents. Princess Lila. Barristan bowed his head to her. Sir Barristan, she greeted, and my brother, Daeron. Princess. Princess Lila was with only two others. There were no signs of a Kingsguard knight or any of her ladies-in-waiting. The one on her right was a plump woman with long brown hair. She wore a dirty dress and kept her head down. The one on her left was a tall man who wore a fastened dark cloak. He carried a sword on his hip and a frown on his lips. My princess, where is your Kingsguard knight? Where is the rest of your retinue? She waved off his concern. Sir Jonnet Hall was summoned by Lord Commander Hightower. She then turned to the woman who accompanied her. You're dismissed. The servant kept her head bowed as she retreated towards the castle. I am not without protection, sir, though I am touched with your concern. This is Maynard. She introduced the man who stood beside her. He's a family friend who has recently pledged his sword to join our household. Maynard had short dark hair and a coarse black beard that he grew to try to hide his unseemly crooked jaw. There was no Sir to his name, but Barristan recognized the stance of a warrior. Sir Barristan the Bold, and Prince Daeron. He bowed his head. I'm honored. I've heard great stories about both of you. Sir Barristan, the knight who killed Maelys Blackfyr. He had a small smile under his large nose. And Princess Lila has told me of her good brother's talent. The prince who broke the Kingswood Brotherhood. That was only accomplished because of the men who fought beside me. Prince Daeron deflected. But you are the one who killed their leader. Simon Toyne. Yes, I killed him in battle. Daeron regarded the stranger in front of him. You are a friend of my good sister. I'm a friend of her mother, the Lady Baela of Lies. My mother's family is not bound by certain prejudices. They have made all sorts of friends across Essos from Pentos to Volantis. Princess Lila explained. They also have a tendency to be ruled by lust instead of logic. Many of them have married whores and thieves, bastards and killers. She didn't sound the least bit ashamed, she actually looked amused at her family's history of dalliances and friendships. I mean no offense, Maynard. I understand, Princess. He tipped his head to her. You are now in the company of nobility. Good, because my son and I are honored to have you join our household. The princess embarrasses me. Maynard shrugged. It's but a single sword. His posture changed when he faced Prince Daeron. A sword I'd be honored to cross with yours, Prince Daeron, he offered. In sparring, of course. That will have to wait. Princess Lila intervened. We are needed back inside the castle. As you command. Princess Maynard did not complain. Her farewells were quick before she passed them with Maynard right behind her. I was not informed of any new guards in Rhaegar's household. Barristan frowned, watching them go. That's just my brother's way, Daeron observed. I've changed my mind, Sir Barristan. I no longer feel the need to return to the castle quite yet. As you say, Sir Barristan deferred to Prince Daeron. They had not been summoned back, nor were they needed to return anytime soon. He saw no reason why the prince couldn't change his plans. The reason why he did that was all too clear to see. Lord Went had spared no expense. Barristan thought even a blind man would be awed by the splendor that House Went was displaying. The great feast that he was hosting in the Hall of 100 Hearths was teeming with extravagance. The decorations were studded with gold and other gems that rested on every table. Some were put on banners, woven into the cloth that hung on the walls. They gleamed like fallen stars. There were steams of exotic silk and lace spread throughout the hall. Every seat was filled. Within this hall were the greatest lords in the 7 kingdoms. There was even more noise that could be heard from the galleries above the feasting nobles who were the lower lords of the realm. Barristan remembered that it was said, an entire army could be feasted within this hall, and it would seem they were right. Even with all the great lords and knights pouring into this castle, the Hall of 100 Hearths did not appear diminished in its size or even too crowded by all its full tables. Barristan had eaten a simple supper before the feast. He chose his diet carefully because he was to take part in the tournament the next day. Barristan had learned that a stomach could not be ignored whether it be in battles or jousting. A poor choice of food or drink could lead to disaster. It's difficult to raise a sword when you're retching up your supper. That did not mean he was not tempted. The smells wafting in the air of spices, meats, sauces, the smell of warm bread and hearty ale, the tart taste of both wines and fruit. It was a feast like no other. He did not think coronation feasts or royal wedding banquets had been this lavish or extensive. Someone who had no problem enjoying the food was his charge, Prince Daeron. He sat at a table full to bursting. He was smiling and laughing while his friends sat all around him. Like a king holding court, Barristan mused. The thought did not linger, but some of the discomfort did for even thinking it. To the prince's right sat Jaime. The 2 men sat across from their betrothed and wife respectively. On Jaime's other side sat Prince Oberyn, who was enjoying the company of a noble woman that Barristan did not recognize. He suspected it was a maiden from the Westerlands, since Lord Tywine and his retinue filled out the rest of the prince's table. On the prince's other side sat Robert and then Ned and Benjen. Ned's sister sat across the Stormlord and his wife sat across from him. The last one at the table was a man who Barristan had just met before the feast. The only nobleman from the north who was here, Howland Reed. He was short and shy, and did not talk much, but when he did it was to either Benjen or Lyanna. Prince Daeron and his betrothed had just rejoined the table after taking to the floor to dance. They were both smiling when they took their seats, teasing and talking to one another as they got themselves more wine. The minstrels were playing horns, pipes, harps, drums, bells. They played both the raucous and the ballads. Neither the tenors nor the instruments could be drowned out by the noise of so much chatter. It was a small army of minstrels and musicians that Lord Went had hired and placed them in places where their music could carry even over the loud din that his guests were making. Barristan stood alert and still from his spot near the table. He was close enough to intervene if it was needed, but there was some space between him and the prince. That and the noise that echoed throughout the hall made it challenging for him to follow the conversations. It did not help that it appeared the friends would break off to speak to different ones, tell separate stories or jokes. It will be done, Jaime declared, a proud smile settling over his face. A bit of color was in his cheeks, the cause was the filled glass in his other hand. I shall crown you my queen of love and beauty, wife. Lady Elia's back was to Barristan so he could not see her face, but he could hear her reply. I do not need the crown. Jaime. Her tone seemed a mixture of caution to make sure her husband didn't do anything foolish, as well as happiness with his determination and devotion at crowning her. Prince Daeron looked amused. I do not think he can be persuaded. He could be, Elia replied, it's the wine in him that cannot be. To good wine, Robert's voice roared over their chatter, raising his tankard, but to better friends. A ripple of agreement went through their table as they drank to the Stormlord's toast. Barristan's eyes left the prince's table to take in their surroundings. He watched passing servants and the guards that milled about. The long tables were lined vertical across the huge hall. At the far end of the hall on the side of the prince's table was the raised platform where 3 tables were placed. To the far left sat the Crown Prince Rhaegar, with him was his wife. At the middle table and sitting alone was King Aerys. He was positioned close enough so if he desired he could speak to either table, but he did not look inclined. His eyes were narrowed and he spoke more to the eunuch who hovered right behind his seat, standing and nodding. On the other king's side sat Lord Went, his wife, his brother Oswell, who had been given the feast off, and then Lord Went's sons, and his daughter. The girl was preening since she was to start the tourney as the Queen of Love and Beauty. Atop her red hair nestled the crown of woven flowers. It appeared she was too excited to wait. Eagerly wanting to show all the great lords and ladies in attendance that she was their Queen of Love and Beauty. He saw his brothers Sir Arthur standing behind Prince Roger, Sirs Deary and Hightower standing behind Aes. Sir Gawain had the night off as well, but he was sleeping after taking his supper. He had one of the earlier posts for the morning. The nobles were deep in their cups while some were deeper in their conversations. Lords Deary and Mouton sat at the far end of their liege lord's table. They were joined by others including members of House Free, a lord whose standard Barristan did not recognize. It looked to be a blue line across a golden field. He saw Lords Tully and Arryn together. Their families sitting with them. Barristan recalled, Lord Arryn's nephew was betrothed to Lord Tully's second daughter. They were easy to find. The girl, Lysa, had a dreamy smile, sitting enraptured in whatever story her betrothed was telling. Denys Arryn had fought well against the Brotherhood and had been knighted by Sir Brynden for his effort. The Blackfish sat away from his brother and Jon Arryn, but close to his other niece and his nephew. He seemed to be telling them his own stories, getting smiles and laughter out of them. There were other tables filled with other lords. They were from the Reach and the Stormlands, but they were further away and closer to Prince Roger's side of the hall. It was chatter from the prince's table that brought his attention to see the prince was rising out of his seat. His decision caught his own betrothed by surprise. Daeron. I am retiring for the evening. Daeron leaned over when he added, I've spotted my brother and I recognize that look. He means to serenade us with his harp. The prince's tone was clipped. Some would call his look inspired or handsome, but not me, he added, to me it looks like he just broke wind. I shall go with you. Lady Cersei rose from her seat at once. I would not argue the chance for an evening stroll, he offered. Along the God's Eye or within the castle's Godswood. That would please me. I think I will depart too. Elia let out a soft yawn, an early rest sounds promising. If I am permitted, she said lightly, referring to the babe inside her and not the husband across from her. Jaime stood. I shall inform father. He got up to go further up the table to where Lord Tywine was sitting. I bid you a good night. Sister Oberyn Martell did not seem inclined to leave. The reason for his reluctance was the woman by his side, freckled and fair. Do not tire yourself out, brother. Elia had moved around the table with her good sister, Cersei, beside her. You are partaking in the jousting tomorrow. And tonight I will be partaking. Good night. Brother. Elia bent down to kiss his cheek before whispering something into his ear which only made her brother give her a shrug and a grin. It appeared that Prince Oberyn would be the only one staying. The Starks stirred from their seats with the Lord of Storm's End following. Lady Lyanna was talking quietly with her younger brother and Howland Reed. Lord Robert was laughing at some hushed whisper spoken from Lady Ashera. Her husband was on her other side, looking just as amused as his friend. Lady Cersei was standing beside her betrothed, her hand resting on his arm. Jaime returned with their father's permission, taking his wife's hand. As well as a complement of Lannister guards who would accompany Prince Daeron and Lady Cersei for the remainder of their planned evening. They would not be the first ones to leave the hall, but their departure was not happening without notice. Barristan felt the eyes of others while they left. He heard some muttering while they passed the tables. He glanced backwards to see Prince Daeron had been right. The Crown Prince was being given his harp by one of his servants, but Roger's eyes were on them. His mouth a thin line while his wife whispered something into his ear. Then they were out of view. The prince and his friends left the hall behind them to look towards another venture of entertainment that did not involve Prince Roger. It was not for another 2 hours or more that found Prince Daeron finally escorting his betrothed back to where her father had tasked his bannermen to set camp. Barristan had heard Lord Tywine had been offered quarters in the castle, but had declined. They had already said their farewells to the Starks who were encamped with Lord Robert and the rest of the Storm Lords. The camps were loud and filled with good cheer. Those who were not given seats in the castle were still given food, drink, and entertainment from House Went. The people were merry, singing and laughing by roaring fires while emptying the barrels of ale that had been brought out. Barristan watched the crowd carefully as they passed. He knew how ale could addle a man's mind. He did not need some man-at-arms trying to start a fight. Under the night sky and filled with wine, men often found themselves no longer chained by their inhibitions. It did not help when their friends would encourage such behavior. Barristan found a mob could make even the most craven man brave with their raucous support and their large gathering, making it easy for men to hide after committing their follies. The noise made it challenging to hear what Prince Daeron and Lady Circea were saying, but he was close enough to quickly step forward to intervene if some drunkard stumbled upon their path. He remained poised and ready. It was a brief walk to reach the Lannister pavilions that were nestled in the center of the camp. Lady Circea's guards peeled away when they reached her large crimson tent. Barristan didn't need to go inside to know it was probably better furnished and decorated than his own chambers at the White Tower. There were a handful of guards already positioned around the entrance. Prince Daeron walked his betrothed all the way to the crimson flag that had been folded back. The words they exchanged were hushed before they kissed. To Barristan's surprise, he did not need to interrupt. Prince Daeron then kissed her cheek before finally walking back to join him. He must have seen his surprise since he was smiling. "You're not going to faint in shock, are you, Sir Barristan?" "I'm trying not to." Prince Daeron chuckled. "I hope we did not keep you too late." "You did not," he assured him. His duties for the night were over once he saw Prince Daeron back to the castle and his chambers. Barristan would need to report to Lord Commander Hightower, but those never took too long. He would have ample time to rest as well as prepare for the first day of jousting. On their walk back to Harrenhal, only parts of the surrounding encampment had quieted or darkened. There were still more fires than he could count, men drinking and shouting or fucking, given some of the other noises they heard when they passed some of the tents. That was when he saw a woman crawling out from a tent in front of them, a loose bit of cloth tied around her waist, and a wisp of silk covering her chest. Her hair was disheveled, but she was smiling. It only widened when she spotted them. Barristan averted his eyes so they would not settle on anything below her neck. "I've never fucked a prince before," she called out to them. "What do you say?" "Neither have I," Prince Daeron replied, never stopping. Barristan chuckled. He did look back towards her, but that was only to make sure that she wasn't trying to follow them. She wasn't. Another was happy to pay her the attention that Prince Daeron had declined. "I was surprised to hear that you would not be participating in the joust, my prince, or in any of the events," he commented on what was on his mind before they were interrupted by a lady of the night. "No, I decided against it." His shoulders stiffened, but within a heartbeat or two his posture relaxed. "There will be other chances to prove my worth, Sir Barristan." "There certainly will be," Barristan easily agreed. He could see the prince winning many future tournaments. He would not be surprised if Prince Daeron was only waiting so that he could be in the tournament they would throw at Summerhall to celebrate his marriage to Lady Circea. "I believe you will do well in the tourney," Prince Daeron said softly, "but then again no one knows what tomorrow will bring." Notes: Joanna had two brothers that are not named, so don't mind me making up some Lannister lore with the Tyrion name. While ignoring the canon that Tywin was the one to name him. What's the point of writing an or if you don't meddle / tweak things here and there? A small section of Sir Barristan's thoughts on Targaryens and love from this chapter were taken and tweaked from where they appear in A Dance with Dragons in the Kingbreaker chapter. Those are George R. R. Martin's words, not mine. While we're at it, this is George R. R. Martin's world, I'm just trying to have a little fun in it. Maynard is not an OC. He's an Asoyaf character. He's just using an alias. His name is a fun nod to the Mystery Knight novella. I like to think the clues are all there to figure out who he is. I can't stress this enough, but going back and reading your reviews does wonders for breaking my writer's block and corralling a stubborn muse. As well as other problems that crop up from time to time. So thank you so much to those who take the time to leave them. So please don't think reviews don't matter, because they really do. They mean a lot to me. So please, if you can review. Until next time. Spectre for Hire. Chapter 31, Ignite. Notes. I'll start this off with the predictable to please comment if you're enjoying the story. It really does mean a lot to me. To those that do, thank you. To the silent majority, if you like it, please comment. Thanks. This chapter does end on a cliffhanger, so you've been warned. Chapter text 281 AC. Circe. The buzzing of the small folk made her think of bees. They see a lioness when they look at me. Circe held her head high while she passed. She was surrounded by Lannister guards, but it was the Lannister they truly respected and feared. As they should. She glanced here and there to see the small folk dispersing while she passed them. The envy, the awe, the lust, she saw it on all their faces. Circe felt their eyes, both the longing and the loathing. The former because they desired her. The latter because they wanted to be her. The clamoring had quieted, the talking turned to whispering, heads turned and tongues wagged, but she did not stop to allow them the privilege to gawk or gaze. Circe was making her way towards her father's encampment to answer his summons. Their days at Harrenhal had been filled with feasts and festivities. Lord Whent had set aside 7 days for jousting. The stands have been filled since it began yesterday with the nobility, while the small folk crowded around the fences like livestock in their pens. These were the finest knights and lords competing for the honor and glory of beating the best in all the 7 kingdoms. Not all the best, she corrected, a small smile playing on her lips. Daeron had decided not to participate in either the melee or the jousting. She was confident he would have won in either competition, but she understood why he chose not to compete. Circe did not think it below Rhaegar to try to arrange an accident to befall his brother. A slip of a dagger in the crowded melee or an errant lance at just the right opportunity. No, she fiercely smothered the image before it could surface. She would not allow it even a heartbeat to breathe. Circe could not part from him. She would not. His life meant more to her than a crown of roses. Her heart took her back to that night at Storm's End. One flesh, she felt the heat coil inside her. Lust and love may have inflamed her passions, but it had not diminished her wits. She knew no babe could be allowed to be conceived from their tryst, so she sought the manner in which to ensure it. It was Daeron's cousin, Robert, who got what she needed. The Lord of Storm's End used his reputation to shield her from scrutiny. Her septa would have said she sullied herself by succumbing to her temptations. She would have squawked certain verses, prayed for forgiveness, and lectured her on the dangers of lust. What does she know? Circe dismissed her, she was just an old hag. She's just bitter because no man would touch her, so she joined the 7. She was a sheep. A lioness does not concern herself with the bleating of the sheep. That's what mother had told her. The sounds of gossip and boasting had her turn her head to see 2 men who she was certain were drunk, were trying to reenact one of the latest jousts that had occurred earlier in the day. Their friends who were sitting around them, hollered and laughed, clapped and cheered when the 2 fools collided into each other. It had been difficult for her to enjoy these first 2 days of the joust. She quietly seethed as she saw Jane Whent sitting with her family, a flower garland atop her head. She waved and preened to the small folk and the nobility alike as if she was truly a queen, but she wasn't. She was nothing. The girl's brothers and uncle were tasked in defending her crown, but they've all since been defeated. The last being Sir Oswell of the Kingsguard, who fell to her brother, Jaime. It was a victory she savoured. As was the crestfallen look on Jane's face when she was confronted with the cold truth that a crown did not suit her. It was not just Lord Whent's daughter that made it challenging for her to enjoy this tournament. It was the unknown. The fog that seemed to settle itself over Harrenhal. It clouded everything and everyone. Every time she watched a joust in the back of her mind she wondered, would this knight or lord ride for Rhaegar or for Daeron? It pressed against her, looking and thinking at trying to puzzle out which prince they'd follow. Mine always sits beside me. Daeron's presence helped to soothe the tension that tried to nest inside her. The small folk did their best to undo it, pricking at her nerves with the way they cheered for their crown prince. How easily they are duped, she thought scornfully, remembering how they reacted to Rhaegar's latest victory. I used to be one of those fools. It was an unseemly comparison, but she could not argue against it. Circe thought so much of him, but those were illusions. They were things she wanted to see, wanted to believe because she wanted the titles and the crown. I was blinded by it all. The crown I wanted was more a veil that hid all his faults from me. Now, all she felt towards him was hatred. It burned stronger and brighter than his father's precious wildfire. First he embarrassed me, now he wishes to cheat me, to steal from me. The fire flared in her belly at the prince's schemes at trying to separate her from the man she loved. She watched and hoped to see the crown prince lose, but alas, much to her irritation, he continued to prevail. He hasn't faced Jaime yet. She knew her brother skilled enough to best the crown prince. If it couldn't be a dragon, then let it be a lion that humbles Rhaegar in front of all the realm. The image that the idea conjured inside her made her snicker in delight. She saw the muddy and defeated Rhaegar on the ground like a pig. She covered her mouth to stem the mirth, but some continued to slip past. They were nearing the Westerland's encampment. Cersei could see the tall, red Lannister banners that were raised above all others in the distance. The wind made the golden lions look to be slashing and clawing the air. They walked by a small group huddled around one of the fires, roasting meat and drinking. She saw no standards on their tunics, only dirt and grime. They stopped talking when they saw her and her guards. They watched them pass in stony silence. Cersei met their glares, refusing to yield even an inch at their attempts to intimidate her. These men are not small folk. They were not meek, but bold. She saw little to help her besides some scraps of yellow cloth that she saw tucked by the fire. Hedge knights. If she had to guess, but they left her mind when she entered her family's encampment. It did not matter the task or conversation, every person she passed, stopped and bowed. She saw the familiar standards of her father's bannermen while she walked towards the center where her family's tents had been put up. The boar of House Crickehall, the burning tree of House Marbrand, the silver ships of House Farman, with each one she passed, they showed her the respect she and her family were due. Still, she smiled politely, and even waved once or twice to acknowledge them. She was not blind to her sway upon seeing how the men reacted to her attention. A woman's weapons are different, Cersei, her mother had told her once, but they can be stronger than steel and swords. How? A smile, a tease, a touch, her mother explained, it can undo a man. She had then raised up a hand as if to stop her thoughts from getting too far ahead. A smile can earn you a sword, a man's loyalty, but it will not allow you to rule effectively. Mother had tapped Cersei's head and she had giggled. You will be nothing without your wits, but you will need steel and fire too. You will need the steel to endure and the fire to drive you. I have those, she had declared proudly. Her mother had given her a fond smile. I believe you do, my dear. She cupped her cheek, but do not let that fire consume you. To let its smoke blind you. Or allow the steel to weigh you down. I won't. Lady Cersei. She saw one of her father's servants in front of her. His name escaped her. Yes. Lord Tywine will be joining you shortly. He raised his head, and though his face was familiar with his wispy moustache and dark eyes, no name came to her. The servant then turned to instruct the guards to open the flaps of her father's tent for her. Thank you was all Cersei said when she passed the nameless servant and guards. The inside of her father's tent hadn't changed since her last visit. It was orderly. Everything had a place and father was meticulous that it was kept there. There were a pair golden lions sewn onto the red canvas in combatant right behind his desk. There was parchment on the top of the desk, all placed in neat piles. The furniture was expertly crafted and richly embroidered. The rug beneath her feet was Mirish, skillfully woven and dyed. It was radiant and expensive. She walked atop it to wait for her father at his desk. Cersei. Father. She turned to see him approach, alone. How are you? He stopped in front of her. His eyes could be piercing, especially the golden flecks within the green, but they weren't when he was looking down at her. I am well, Father, she answered after she curtsied. You look beautiful, he praised her with a small smile. Thank you, Father. She took her seat after he did. Two servants arrived before they could begin any meaningful conversation. They brought with them an array of food and wine. They carefully placed it between them, making sure not to disturb what was already there. The wine and glasses were next. They moved quickly to pour it for them. They kept their heads bowed the entire time. When they were finished, they backed away, but waited to be dismissed. That will be all, Father told them. They left as quietly as they entered. Cersei plucked a few grapes from the plate, but was mindful at how she ate them. Where is Prince Daeron? He is speaking with his father. She couldn't completely crush the worry that slithered in her belly anytime she was forced to dwell on the king, especially when her betrothed was in his company. You care for him. I love him, father, she corrected instantly. His face was stone. More than your family. He is my family. His eyes regarded her quietly with his scrutinizing gaze. It was a look that used to make her stomach clench, but now she found herself meeting it without worry. She was calm instead of trembling. Her father was the same man, but she was no longer that young girl. Circea had discovered her own strength. She had seen death charge her, but she held fast to meet it with her sword. She cut down that raper without hesitation. She watched the life leave his eyes. The dead man's stare did not bother her, and her father's no longer could either. The hold was gone. When you told me you wanted to learn to fight, I wanted to crush it, dismiss it, he said bluntly. It was beneath our family. You're not a soldier. You're not a knight. You're not a lord. You're not a man, she finished for him. None of this surprised her since she already knew of his dislike of her fighting. You didn't. No, I didn't. He took a small sip from his glass, but his stoicism never wavered. It was your mother who talked me out of it. The gold in his hazel eyes always seemed to gleam when he talked about her. She told me that would be a mistake. That I was wrong. The smallest of smiles came to his lips at recalling it. Circea wasn't sure who else would be so bold as to tell father that he was wrong. I could, she wanted to say, if she had to, I would. What did she say? That Prince Daeron was not demeaning our family, he was not disrespecting our daughter. She told me that he did this because he respected you. Father's face was pensive. She pointed out that I had done something similar for her before we married. It wasn't a sword, but she was right. He didn't look like he'd further explain what it was. He respects you. He met her eyes, and he is right to do so, Circea. His expression did not change, but his tone showed his pride in her. That is the sort of husband you deserve. Thank you, father. You will marry Prince Daeron, he told her simply, and woe to those who dare to stop us. It really is remarkable. Lyanna's grey eyes were envious as she held Circea's sword. Circea said nothing. Lyanna was right. It was a remarkable sword. And it was mine. He made it just for you. Lyanna's tone was filled with dismay. She looked to be trying to make sense of something so unexpected as a man giving his intended a sword. He did. Circea spoke with all pride when she talked about her sword, or more importantly her prince. He modeled it after his sword, Dark Sister. She was particularly pleased by that. Lyanna's fingers traced the engraved dragon that made up part of the hilt. You are blessed to have a betrothed such as him. I am, she said happily. It was difficult not to gloat even when she wasn't trying to. Circea saw the wistfulness in the girl's eyes, and she was reminded of a certain friend. Robert feels similarly and just as strongly as Prince Daeron. A favor for a favor, Robert. He's a good man. She surprised herself when she found herself meaning it. The Stark girl didn't answer. Her eyes stubbornly transfixed on the sword. He is. She chewed on her lower lip before she sighed. He has a bastard. She looked guilty, bringing up Maya. She's a good girl, she added hastily, and I was surprised when Robert said she'd be fostered in Dawn and by Prince Doran, no less. That was years ago. Circea wasn't familiar with Maya's age offhand. Daeron tells me that he has curbed those tastes, remembering how her betrothed had delicately put it. You believe him? Of course, I do, she nearly snapped. She did not like the Stark girl questioning Daeron's integrity. Forgive me, Lyanna sensed it. She dispelled another breath. This one longer and louder. It pushed back some of the dark brown hair that had fallen loose. You're scared? Circea saw it on her face. What? Her head snapped up. The surprise melted swiftly with her expression hardening. I'm not scared, she scoffed. Circea wasn't fooled, because she saw the truth of it despite her denial. The idea of him as her husband, that seed was already in the girl's heart and it had taken root. I'm just watering it. Here, she mumbled when she handed back the sword. The truth that they both knew, but didn't say, was that in the end the choice wasn't theirs to make. It belonged to their fathers. They were pieces, not players, bonds she tried to break since she was a girl. Circea was fortunate that she had Daeron, who had given her the key to unlock them. He respects you. Father's words rung in her ears. Circe had seen enough of the girl in front of her to know that she was not one to be courted or caged. That this Lioness would fight and claw her way out of anything she did not want. She'd tightly grip whatever little she had, including her freedom and pride, before she'd submit to the suitors her name and age were no doubt attracting. Liak. They were interrupted by the presence of two boys scrambling towards them. When they got closer, Circe recognized them as Lioness' brother Benjen and their friend, Howland. "We've been looking everywhere for you," Benjen said before finally noticing Circe for the first time. His cheeks went red. "Lady Lannister," he hastily bowed his head. The Cranogman followed his example. Circe was amused, but acknowledged their greeting. "We need to leave." Benjen was trying not to look in Circe's direction, but his glances were hardly furtive. Howland was standing behind him, older, but shorter, not speaking, but nodding. "You wanted us to get you before the jousting." "Ah, yes." That seemed to pull Lioness out of her musings. "Thank you, Benjen." She forced herself to smile. Before she turned back to her, she dropped a rather clumsy curtsy. "Thank you for the time, Circe, and for the words." Circe inclined her head, but by then the three of them were already beating a hasty retreat. She wanted to curse while all around her they cheered and clapped. Circe showed none of her anger or her resentment when the Crown Prince of the Seven Kingdoms appeared for his next opponent in the joust. Daeron stiffened beside her. She put a hand on his arm. Her fingers could feel his tension. She felt her own knots forming in her belly. Behind her, she heard the chattering of some of Lila's ladies-in-waiting who had come into their box for the afternoon tilts. Spies, she saw their true purpose. More like hens, she resented their presence, and the princess' audacity to foist them on her. Flaunting what little power she had, she must be so proud of herself, Circe sneered. Her thoughts broken up by their mindless babbling, she was sorely tempted to shove one of them over the box just to get some silence. She didn't, but the temptation grew when their nasally voices grew too loud. She kept her hand on Daeron while her eyes moved across the yard to see who the prince's opponent would be this time. His standard bearer stood proudly while it rippled in the wind, waving to the crowd. It was several black dots on a brown field with letters bordering. It took her a second or two to recognize the standard for House Royce, which meant that they weren't letters, but runes. Lord Royce's helm was already down while his squire was helping him. The Lord of Runestone was wearing bronze armor that had runes scribbled all over it. She remembered either Ned or Robert commenting on it, saying the Royces claimed the runes would ward their wearers from harm. Circe didn't believe that, but she was willing to hope if it meant seeing Prince Roriger defeated. 4, lose, lose, the chant changed in her head when she watched the two charge one another. The whooping roar of the crowd couldn't soften the sound of broken lances or the slam of the force hitting the riders, but neither men had fallen. She thought she saw the prince waver when Lord Royce's lance hit, but that may have just been her hope in wanting to see it. 4, she wanted Roriger humiliated watching the two ride towards one another. The thundering of horses, the large inhale from the collective audience, silent and anxious. It was no more than a heartbeat or two, but it was an eerie feeling to be in a crowd so large, but for there to be absolute quiet. The loud cheer punctured the silence like a spear thrust when the two traded blows with their lances. Wood splintered, but neither fell. Perhaps, that armor isn't so ridiculous. Circe spoke too soon, with the third tilt proving to be the deciding one as Prince Roriger unhorsed Lord Royce. The small folk cheered for Roriger like the witless fools they were. The women behind her were breathlessly babbling to one another, fawning over their crown prince. She hated it. She hated them. She hated the prince. She even hated Lord Royce's stupid armor. Circe kept her annoyance to herself. She politely smiled and clapped, aware that she was being watched. She saw Princess Lila sitting above, looking proud, clapping with all the decorum expected of a princess. She's probably already picturing being crowned the Queen of Love and Beauty by him. That was when Circe stopped clapping. The only solace Cersei Lannister had that night was that Crown Prince Roriger was not what everyone was talking about after an afternoon of tilts. It was this mystery knight, who the small folk were already calling the Knight of the Laughing Tree, due to the shield he bore, which was of a smiling weirwood. Cersei hadn't thought much of his chances when she first saw him. He had been the strangest and shortest knight she had ever seen. His armor was an assortment of ill-fitting and matching pieces that looked to be strung together. His sudden appearance had sparked whispers and gasps, but it was what followed that earned everyone's excitement and interest. Better this night's story than Roriger's. She was already wary of what tomorrow could bring. Circea did not want to watch another day of Roriger's triumphs in the tilts. Circea. She looked up at once at the sound of her name coming from his lips. The smile came quickly, as did that flutter, seeing him standing in the entranceway of her tent, but walking in his smile looked forced. Circea cut the distance between them. What is it? She wrapped her arms around him. His posture was stiff, but she felt it begin to relax from her embrace, so she held him a little longer, resting her head against his chest. His hands were calloused, but soothing when they rested on her back. Daeron had been summoned by his father after the jousts, and she hadn't seen him since. Not here. His voice tickled her ear. She looked up to see the concern in his pretty eyes. She nodded. She knew father's guards were milling just outside, as was Daeron's. They were only giving them this private reprieve, she thought, out of loyalty or respect. That's what she wanted to think, to believe that she could inspire the same sort of devotion that her parents or Jaime could amidst her family's men. The two didn't speak when they left her tent. She did not like his mood. This had been the second time that his father had wanted to talk to him this day alone. Circea's stomach clenched. She studied his face and was relieved to see there were no signs of any new scars from his father. Their guards followed at a respectable distance. Segwayne was with the mixture of Targaryen and Lannister men, ensuring that no one stepped too close to them in his effort to keep their conversation from being overheard. They were walking out of the Westerland's encampment. It's this Mystery Knight. What about him? Father is certain he's an enemy, Daeron said softly. She felt her heart hitch. It wasn't just the words that brought that cold feeling of dread to begin to pool inside her. It was what it could mean. Aerys was still the king. An enemy. She shouldn't have been surprised that he'd see the unassuming Mystery Knight as some sort of foe. Yes, she hadn't thought it was possible, but his voice had grown even more solemn. He's ranting and raving that the knight is an enemy to his reign. How he is a threat that is mocking him. Circea didn't know how to respond. Her eyes drifting around the rows upon rows of tents they walked by with what she thought was no real destination in mind. Besides a glance or a murmur, she and Daeron were ignored. No one appeared brave enough to approach the dragon and the lioness. Even the ignorant can be right a time or two. They turned. She remembered the group of men she saw near this spot from earlier in the day, but her eyes scanned the crowded surroundings, but saw no sign of them. Were one of them the Mystery Knight? Those men who were neither small folk or nobility. She suspected hedge knights, so she thought it could be possible one of them had been the Knight of the Laughing Tree. They had worn no colors, just like the Knight Hadden, except for that weirwood on his shield, but they had carried nothing, except those discarded scraps of yellow cloth. What did you say to him? She knew the precariousness of having to speak with King Aerys. She had seen what it could cost, remembering Daeron's handsome face, blooded and marred by cuts. And he was one of the few who were considered successful at it, but that hadn't stopped him from being attacked by his own father. I could not say much, Daeron admitted, sounding tired. He looked down, warring emotions played across his face, but she could not see them clearly. Daeron. She put a finger to his chin, tipping his head up so she could see his lovely lilac eyes. He was terrified, he said quietly, and terrifying. It was an easy picture for her to conjure, but a tougher one to stomach given what it could mean. What of Roriger? Roriger. Daeron seemed almost momentarily baffled by the mention of his brother. Roriger was just as surprised and scared, she thought, but didn't finish for him. Circea squeezed his hand. Father has all the Kingsguard knights save for Sir Arthur and Quain attending him. What of the knight? She pitied this unknown man. She doubted he had gone out on the list today to try to rouse the king's wrath. He's sent men into the camps, Daeron answered. He wants the knight found at once. Circea didn't want to think about trying to find a stranger in a sea of so many people. The castle and the surrounding area were brimming with men from all 7 kingdoms, nobility to small folk. It would be no easy or simple task. Daeron frowned. What? She didn't like the soft, but noticeable change in his tone. I made a mistake, he confessed. I gambled and I lost. They were on the outskirts of the encampments. There were no people, only signs and sounds of them. The ground was beaten down by footprints and hoofprints caked into the mud. The latrines were off to the side, frequented by many, but thankfully the breeze carried none of those smells towards their position. She had stayed quiet. She didn't want to press him despite the restless threshing she felt stirring in her chest. Daron. Then again, patience was never my virtue. He gently pulled on her hand, walking further away until even the latrines were out of sight. They found a small grove. The only sounds were from the birds in the branches, uncaring about her and her betrothed standing below them. I thought I could use him for my advantage, Daron began, the mystery knight, to try to. She nodded, understanding what he meant, to use him against Roriger. Father was furious. Daron didn't meet her eyes. Circe looked at him closely. She was certain she had seen no marks on him, but now that she was standing in front of him instead of at his side, she saw faint red lines on his tunic. Circe had been so distracted by his sudden presence in her tent and his mood that she never noticed them when she saw and hugged him. She put a finger to one of the lines to discover that the red was not silk, but dried blood. Daron. He didn't respond. Circe didn't care about the knights who had accompanied them. She didn't care what they'd think or what they'd say, because she needed to know. She tugged on his tunic. Besides a wince, he didn't try to stop her. Ignoring the murmuring from the men behind her, she undid the black buttons. She hadn't even made it halfway when she saw it. There on his chest were 4 angry red marks cut into his skin. They were not deep and the smears of dried blood made it look worse than what it was, but it showed what she feared. She felt the icy dread spread through like a spider's web around her heart. He screamed at me, Daron continued. He tried to grab my throat but stumbled, causing him to get my chest instead. He let out a bitter laugh. Daron, her hand was resting against his scarred chest. We need to leave. We can't. He looked down at her with a sad smile. Father has put out patrols. No one is to leave until he finds this Knight of the Laughing Tree. Daron. I shouldn't have said it. That look in Father's eyes, that gargled shout when he charged him. Daron had parried hundreds of attacks, dodged just as many strikes, but he froze in the face of his father's wrath. It wasn't until Father's long nails cut against his skin did he feel like he could move again. He steadied his attacker so his father wouldn't stumble. He wasn't thanked for it. Father hissed and squirmed and spat, and Daron quickly let go. He steadied himself for another strike, but it didn't come. What was I to do? Strike my father? My king? He had thought of the attack afterwards when he had been on his way to Circe. If I had done that, Father would have arrested me and Roriger would have won. Sir Lunmouth claims he'll find the knight before mid-afternoon tomorrow. Robert's loud voice burst through his thoughts. Was that before or after your two's drinking? Jamed asked dryly from across Daron. During, Robert corrected with that smile and infectious laugh. Daron welcomed his cousin's mirth. It helped to chase away the dark thoughts. He looked across to see Circe was smiling too, but her green eyes didn't shine the way he liked when she was truly happy. He didn't tell his friends what his father told him. If he did, he knew they would not be japing or laughing about this night. Father hadn't announced his orders because he hadn't wanted to startle this poor knight, but that wouldn't stop Daron from telling his friends after the feast. He recognized the name of Robert's drinking companion, a Stormland knight, who was loyal to Roriger, not Robert. Richard had been one of Roriger's squires and had been knighted by him too. He suspected that Richard's words were less drunken boasting and more Roriger's orders. I tried to use the knight too, brother. Daron was so certain he could do it successfully, but he failed. He knew his father's anger burned like fire. He thought he could stroke it properly, but he got burned by it instead. There was little pain from the scratch, but it was a nasty reminder of how capricious his father was. Daron. Yes. He felt his friend's eyes on him. He suspected he was asked something, but he wasn't listening. He drew it out by taking a sip from his glass. The Arbor Gold tasted sweet in his mouth, helping to wash away the bad taste of his father's mania. You're quiet about this Knight of the Laughing Tree, Cousin Robert poked him, trying to hide your identity. Prince Daron cannot be the mystery knight, Robert Elia said patiently. he was in the stands. Our Robert had either forgotten that important detail or had never noticed it. He was sitting with me. An honest mistake. Then Robert recovered, turning to Circe. Your beauty draws the eye, my lady. He flashed her a smile. So you're blaming my sister's beauty instead of the ale? Asked an amused Jamie. Robert, who was holding his tankard almost to his lips, stopped. Yes. Such praise. Robert. Circe's smile was all show, but they all were fooled by it. They were the only two who knew the cold fate that was awaiting this celebrated knight of the Laughing Tree. Tonight they toast him, but tomorrow they'll bury him. Do you think we should return? Daeron looked down where Circe didn't look the least bit inclined to leave despite her asking the question. She was currently using his shoulder as a pillow. She was beautiful in her red silk dress with golden embroidery. They were stretched out under a tall oak tree. What remained of their picnic scattered by their side. They had returned to the grove that they had stumbled onto yesterday. It had been her idea to try to find some peace and quiet before the afternoon of tilts. The morning had plenty of excitement, even if some of it dimmed with the crowd's disappointment of the mystery knight not returning. The Knight of the Laughing Tree did not know how fortunate he was by not attending. Daeron decided that it would be wiser to tread carefully and avoid his father before the afternoon tilts. He had already tried to use the knight once and it ended poorly. Do you want to? No, she stirred so she could meet his inquisitive gaze, but we're expected to. We're expected to do a lot of things. He then leaned down and kissed her. If we do not return, my father will send out men. We're not without our chaperones. He pointed across the grove where the Lannister guards had been given their own food and ale. They were now gathered in a circle, more intently focused on playing dice than watching them. That is no accident, but he was not going to complain. She gave him a small, playful smile. We'll miss the afternoon tilts. We can't have that. He noticed that she still made no effort to remove herself from his side. Prince Daeron. He was the one with the responsible chaperone. Yes, Sir Gawain. The lady speaks true. The Kingsguard knight had been off to the side, likely the only one doing his duty on this lazy and sunny afternoon. Thank you, Sir Gawain. Circe replied. That was when she reluctantly got herself to her feet. Left with no other choice, he stood up too. Sir Gawain. Circe called over to the Kingsguard knight. Yes, my lady. Would you give us a few moments alone, please? Gawain raised an eyebrow at that suspicious request. It would be appreciated, Circe said with her sweet smile. If we do not catch up with you in a time you think appropriate, you have my permission to drag my betrothed the rest of the way. The knight chuckled. I can agree to those terms. He turned back to the Lannister men who were already packed. He gave the order and they followed him into the woods, leaving Circe and Daeron alone in the grove. Circe gets what she wants. Daeron was curious as to why she sent them on their way. Her green eyes glimmered and her lips curled upwards. I wanted a moment with you, she said, a selfish moment. She kissed him. I won't complain. He brushed back some of her golden hair. A moment where we don't have to think about our fathers, or your brother, she went on, or what will become of us after this tournament. She kissed him again. You will become my wife, he assured her. He was about to say more, but a noise caused him to look up and towards the trees in front of them. What is it? She was trying to follow his line of sight. I thought I heard something. It could just be Sir Gawain coming to drag you back, she offered lightly. Daeron wanted to smile, but he didn't. We should get going. He put his other hand on the hilt of Dark Sister, a move that did not go unnoticed. Daeron. The rustling in front of them couldn't be ignored or overlooked. Daeron was going for his sword when a familiar voice called out to him. Prince Daeron. Sir Jonnet Hordari stepped into the grove. Behind him were several men, all of whom were wearing House Daeron's livery. What is the meaning of this? Circe demanded, undaunted at the face of so many guards against her. Treason. A new voice joined them. It was Jon Connington entering the grove with more than a handful of men, all of whom were wearing his house's colors. Daeron made sure Circe was as close to him as she could, while still keeping himself slightly in front of her. His fingers remained on the pommel of his sword. He looked over their new visitors, these intruders who were all armed and armored. You're under arrest. Prince Daeron Connington was holding up a piece of parchment. He was smugly displaying it to show that it bore Heir's seal. Roriger, you've been busy. Daeron saw his brother's intentions behind their father's words. You cannot be serious. Cersei tried to push her way forward, fury pushing aside any caution. Quiet. It was Sir Jonathan Hordari who spoke despite Connington's pinched face showing he had wanted to be the one to say something. You were always one of my brother's dogs, Daeron said coolly to the Kingsguard knight in front of him. I serve the king, he corrected, as does Sir Gawain, who remembered his vows. He told them, at our approach, he accepted our orders and was accompanied back to Harrenhal. Liar! Cersei snapped. Jonathan Hor turned to her. Your Lannister guards were not so easily swayed. Blood spilled. Now that he was looking for it, he saw the red stains on some of the men's armor. He felt a chill go up his back. You're a fool to attack a lion, Cersei growled at them. Connington looked her over with contempt. I don't see a lion, but a greedy bitch who's trying to steal what isn't hers. Don't. Daeron had already taken 2 steps forward towards the Stormlord, Dark Sister in hand, before Daeron's words cut through to him. The knight had put himself between him and Connington. The men at arms for Daeron and Connington bristled at his approach. He still considered attacking Connington despite Daeron's insistence on intervening. Jonathan Hor is skilled, Daeron studied the knight in front of him. I could fight him, and I could kill him. It was the dozen men at arms behind them that stayed his hand. Forgive me, Jon. Daeron did not sheath his sword, but he did lower it. Dark Sister just wanted a kiss. He kept his eyes on Connington, who was openly glaring back. What exactly is this treason that has given my brother the belief he can arrest me with impunity? The orders were from your father, the king, Connington corrected. Roriger discovered your little plot, Daeron. To think you could best him, he snorted. You were always jealous of him. It's a wonder you can breathe, Connington, with your nose so far up Roriger's ass. Daeron smirked upon seeing the Stormlord's face begin to purple. Enough. Jonathan Hor sounded annoyed. You're to come back to the castle with us to face these charges. I'm flattered you brought so many men. Daeron saw no other purpose for them, but to ensure his cooperation, especially after they killed the Lannister guards. He wondered about Quain. He didn't believe his sworn shield would just bow meekly to this. He wouldn't do that to me. You speak of plots, Cersei cut in, but these sound like lies to unjustly arrest my betrothed. They are not lies, my lady, Jonathan Hor replied. Prince Roriger found the mystery knight. The Knight of the Laughing Tree? Cersei asked, her anger momentarily receding to her surprise and confusion. What does he have to do with any of this? He wasn't a mystery knight, Connington corrected her sharply. He was one of Daeron's men. What? The surprise washed over him first, but it was the cold that sunk into him upon realizing what it was his brother was doing. Roriger had succeeded where I failed. He's pinning the mystery knight on me, and father believes him. He didn't know how he did it, but Roriger had apparently gone after and either found the knight or convinced their father he had, manipulating it all to make it look like Daeron was the enemy. The timing was just as clever, he had to admit. Roriger sent his faithful men to arrest Daeron when the afternoon tilts were about to begin, which meant many of Daeron's friends and men were there or already on the way, unable to help him. By the time they were made aware of Daeron's arrest, he'd already be in the crown's control. The knight confessed to everything, Daeron, Jonathan Hor reported grimly. All about your plot to steal your brother's throne after marrying your betrothed. Did he? He wanted to laugh at the truth that could be found mixed in with all the lies. All he had truly wanted was to marry Cersei. He had no qualms in residing in Summerhall with her, but Roriger wouldn't give him that. His brother couldn't give him peace. He schemed and threatened to the point that Daeron could take no more of it. I didn't want any of this. My brother didn't need lies to arrest me, just proof, he observed, but he couldn't find that, so he did the easy thing and chose lies to give him the chance he's been looking for. He considered his brother's risky decision, lies that can just as likely hurt or haunt him than they can me. Whatever plans Daeron may have put forward, they did not involve a mystery knight whose identity he did not even know. I have been busy, especially since I'm allies with a man I don't even know. Even when caught you mock and lie. Connington looked at him with disgust. Who is this knight? Daeron was curious upon knowing who his brother had found to play this vital role in his plot to undo him. Neither Daeron nor Connington looked in the mood to answer his question regarding him, as if it was a jape and nothing more. He's dead. It was someone else who answered. Daeron turned around to see Maynard, his good sister's hired sword, Behind him were a handful of men bearing the livery of House Mouton. Lord Commander Hightower and Sir Oswell Went were with him. They were joined by Went soldiers. "This is a lot of men," Daeron remarked casually while quietly realizing the very poor circumstances that now found him and Cersei completely surrounded. "Your brother is not a fool," Lord Commander Hightower replied. No, I was, he thought, because of the predicament he now found himself in. While he had been away with Cersei, his brother had been busy. "This belonged to your friend." Maynard tossed something at Daeron's feet. He looked down to find himself staring at a wooden shield with the smiling weirwood tree painted on it, the standard for the Mystery Knight. He noticed the red fingerprints along the edges and the smear of blood. "I'm not surprised Rhaegar killed him." Daeron looked back up. "I cannot refute a dead man's lies." Lord Commander Hightower moved forward. "Drop your sword, Daeron." There were no titles or formalities to be observed. They didn't see him as a prince, but a traitor. "This will be war." Cersei warned them, showing no sign of capitulating to their demands. "No, it is over," Lord Commander Hightower replied solemnly, but his eyes were on Daeron. "Cowards." Cersei pointed an angry finger towards the three knights in white. Her fury and sharp tongue was working just as well as the threat of Dark Sister was at keeping the men back. "We're following orders, my lady." Sir Oswell didn't look at either of them when he spoke. His tone was hardly convincing. Neither Daeron nor Hightower's presence had surprised Daeron. His brother chose well in picking them. He had never been close to either of them, but Sir Oswell had been one of his guards for many years, including when he was a child. Daeron could not deny the disappointing ache he felt at seeing the knight with them. Enough of this. Connington's patience had worn out. "Bind them both," he ordered. "We can return the Lady Lannister back to her father before any harm befalls her." Seeing no other choice, he reluctantly sheathed Dark Sister. They grabbed his arms from behind. That was when he heard shouting. Then there was chaos. Chapter 32, Chaos. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. 281 AC. Jaime. Jaime. It wasn't adoration, but confusion that his wife greeted him with when Jaime returned to his family's tent. He couldn't fault her for that since they weren't expecting to see him so soon after already leaving for the tourney grounds to prepare for his joust. "Wife," he responded with a smile, making his way over to her. She was sitting beside his father. Across from and on the other side of Jaime's father was his good brother, Oberyn. The Red Viper wasn't due until later in the lists, so had made himself comfortable with his sister and Jaime's father. What do they have to talk about? His curiosity and confusion only grew when he saw amusement flash across his father's face at whatever it was Oberyn had just said. It was almost enough to distract him from his pregnant wife, almost. "I forgot something," he confessed, knowing he made the right decision to return when she smiled at him. The way she glowed, he basked in it. She was brighter than her family's sun. "What is it that you forgot, dear husband?" Elia's Dornish lilt always had an effect on him. She noticed too, judging by that small and playful smirk. "Your favor." She raised an eyebrow at him. "I've lost count of the number of favors I've given you for this tournament." Still she didn't protest his request. She pulled out an orange ribbon from her dark curls. "Here you are." She tied it to his arm since he was already in his armor. He was one of the first jousts which were drawing near. "Thank you." He put his hand over hers which was still on his arm. "Thank you for everything," he added when his other hand rested on her swelling stomach. She leaned in to kiss him. "Are you trying to make me late, wife?" He was proud at how sharp he sounded after her searing kiss. Her eyes were sparkling in amusement, but before she could answer him, her golden eyes caught something over his shoulder that dimmed her smile. "Ashera." Jaime turned to see Lady Stark. Her violet eyes were unfocused. There were ruffles in her dress and dirt along its hem. "They are still not back." He stepped aside when he noticed Elia gesturing for Ashera to take the seat beside her. "No, Ned and Robert have looked all afternoon." Once she sat down, Elia grabbed her friend's hands. "They haven't been able to find them anywhere," she revealed. "I had thought they might have stopped here." "They haven't." Jaime frowned at his friend's predicament. Lyanna, Benjen, and their friend Howland hadn't been seen since after the morning tilts. He knew his friends had gone off several times with men from Robert's retinue to try to find them, but they've all proven to be unsuccessful. We can lend men, he offered, before remembering that he wasn't the Lord of Casterly Rock and said Lord was already in the tent with them. There was hardly a pause before he heard his father's voice. We can. He nearly sagged in relief that his father had agreed with him and hadn't tried to correct or chide him in front of everyone. Jamie looked to his father to see he was already watching him expectantly. The message was clear: this is your task, your responsibility to coordinate. I'll have some men accompany Robert and Ned next time I see them. The only problem was he was not sure when that next time would be. He needed to leave for the tourney grounds or he'd forfeit his joust. Something he had no intention of doing, since he still wished to crown his wife the Queen of Love and Beauty. You're bleeding. Jamie was startled out of his thoughts by his wife's outburst. There, standing in the entranceway of the tent, was Segwayne. His white armor and cloak were covered in blood splatters. It's not my blood, my lady. What is the meaning of this? His father demanded. Where is my daughter? Father's eyes were transfixed on the red stains. Prince Roriger has moved to arrest Prince Daeron. The knight's words led to a swell of raising voices. He's sent several knights and men to arrest him. Gawain had to all but shout to finish his message. Jamie could barely hear his own thoughts over all the noise. Even if he could hear them, how was he to focus on any of them with this revelation? His stomach turned painfully at the idea of his friend being unfairly arrested. The discomfort couldn't hold him for long. It began to melt away to the simmering anger he felt churning at the audacity of Prince Roriger's actions. The bards will need to add a few new verses to a particular song. They killed the men you had assigned to your daughter, my lord. Segwayne bowed his head to pay his respect, and I killed the ones they assigned to me. His gloved hand made a brief gesture to one of the many stains on his cloak. His father's voice was deathly quiet, but it brought an immediate hush to the tent. Will not stand. He slowly stood up. Where is my daughter? Who are you? The proud lord said. Jamie couldn't forget the last ones who tried to defy his father and their family. That I must bow so low. She was with Prince Daeron, my lord. Gawain answered. They said they were only to arrest the prince. They may use her as a hostage. Uncle Kevan had somehow slipped into the room unseen during the commotion, or he had already been within and Jamie had missed him. He was not really sure which. And mine are long and sharp, my lord. Jamie had never seen his father so angry. As long and sharp as yours. For someone who claims to read history, he thought Roriger remarkably stupid with his choices. Did he think father and I would smile and bow when he arrested my friend and made my sister his hostage? We must go at once, father. Yes, now the rains weep o'er his hall. Jamie understood what was at stake, and not a soul to hear. I agree. His father wasn't looking at him. Kevan, you will assemble the lords and send a message to the guards of our encampment. His hands were leaning on the table. I expect that we may have company. The golden flecks in his eyes burned with anger. Roriger Targaryen has declared war on House Lannister, as well as on House Martell. Lord Tywine inclined his head towards the Dornish prince. Jamie, you are to get Prince Daeron and your sister. I will send more knights after you to provide you with horses and to defend your retreat in case Prince Roriger sends in more men. I was fortunate to have already found Lords Robert and Ned before I reached you. Segwayne informed them. They are already on their way with their men. Then we shouldn't keep them waiting. Jamie was pleased to know that he'd have his friends with him. He'd want no one else but them by his side. Lady Elia. Lord Tywine turned to his good daughter. You will leave swiftly with a substantial retinue of my best knights and men at arms. You will return to the rock untouched. Thank you, Tywine, but Lady Ashura will also need to be traveling with us, Elia insisted, since her husband and his men have already gone in search of Prince Daeron and Lady Cersei. He didn't raise an issue with it. Lady Stark is our honored guest. Father's tent seemed full to bursting with so many different guards and servants rushing around trying to follow their new orders. Ashura Stark gave her thanks to the Lord of Casterly Rock. Prince Oberyn, who had been talking to one of his attendants, spoke up. The men we brought will be alerted and will assist you, Lord Tywine, in the defense of this encampment if it comes to that, and our retreat. Thank you, Prince Oberyn. He turned to where a silent Lannister men-arms had just stepped in. Nearly a dozen men are armed and ready to go while more are preparing, Lord Tywine. My son will be handling this insult. Tell them we're leaving immediately. Jaime didn't watch the Lannister guard leave. He expected small numbers since many of their men were dispersed throughout the encampment or at the tourney grounds. All of whom were preparing to be entertained by an afternoon of tilts, but were now needed to prepare themselves for the threat of battle. I will go with you. Segwayne's inclusion surprised none of them. I have only a handful with me who are ready to fight. The Red Viper is all I really need, Jaime assured his friend, before he turned to his wife. I'll see you on the road, he promised her with a kiss. Be safe. Her hand was warm on his cheek before she sent him off. The tournament was over, but it seemed the war was just beginning. It was less than 20 men that followed them. The numbers did not concern him since he knew more would be on the way. Not to mention, Robert was ahead of them with his own men. Another reason for his calm confidence was of the superior skill that many of them had, including Prince Oberyn and Segwayne, who were walking beside him, as well those ahead of them such as Robert and Prince Daeron. It's not arrogance, he thought, just honesty. No, all that concerned him was getting to his friend and sister. They had moved unhindered to the grove. Many of the tents were empty and very few were in the encampment. Everyone had traveled towards the castle and the tourney grounds, excited for an afternoon of jousting. They're about to be disappointed, Jaime thought of them, waiting for a joust that will not start. It'll be enough to alert Rhaegar that something is amiss. That observation dimmed his mood, but hurried his steps. Up ahead, he heard shouting, easily recognizing the loudest of them. Jaime smiled despite what they were running into. He turned to two of his men. You are to go to my sister and guard her. You are to take her away from the fighting, but you will need to be close enough to join us in our retreat when the horses arrive. They nodded at his orders. Jaime welcomed the sound of his sword escaping its sheath. He picked up his pace the rest of the way. He pushed aside branches and danced over the roots that snaked under his feet. The voices were getting louder, as were the sounds and songs of battle. He saw the light of the grove ahead of them, and then with a few more steps he was at its borders. He took the scene in front of him in a long heartbeat, and the only word he could use to describe it was chaos. His eyes scanned the heated fighting between the two sides. He first spotted Prince Daeron, dark sister in hand, and a pile of Connington men-at-arms at his feet. His friend was now fighting Sir Jonathan Hordeary. Segwayne had warned them that they'd be facing Knights of the Kingsguard. Jaime had always wanted to test his skill against them, but this was not what he had in mind. It would not deter him, because he was ready to do what he needed to save his friend and sister. It was a different shout that sent his attention frantically flickering in the other direction to see his sister. His heart lurched at what he saw. Cersei was covered in blood. Go to her, he urged the men he assigned to her. He feared what wounds she had suffered in the attack, but then he saw the bloody tipped dagger in her hand and he realized Cersei was the one doing the attacking. Next he saw Robert and Ned, where he was relieved to see they looked unharmed, Robert's men-at-arms staving off what looked like more than a dozen men from House Went. Robert was fighting Lord Commander Hightower, who looked to be struggling with the Lord of Storm's End. Ned was crossing swords with a knight who bore no standard. Jaime raised his sword, for House Lannister. He led his men into battle. He heard the cries for House Martell. With Oberyn beside him. Both sides turned at the noise. Robert welcomed them with a loud roar while his men's spirits were instantly lifted at the reinforcements. They began fighting harder while Rhaegar's men were startled by another wave of fresh men joining the fray. The first men who fought Jaime came as a blur. He dealt with them swiftly, a flick of the sword to one before the boy could raise his sword. The other only lasted a parry before Jaime found his opening and cut the man's throat. He wasn't even sure which family these men-at-arms he was killing belonged to. Jaime cut down a Mutan man-at-arms who thought his axe could beat his sword. He was wrong. Jaime's sword put him to the ground, where he was quick to send another when he removed the man's head from his shoulders. From behind him he could hear his sister's loud complaints at being taken out of the fighting. "She'll forgive me." Up ahead, he saw his friend's ongoing success. Dark Sister was a steel serpent lashing out in quick strikes that were making Sir Jonathan stumble backwards. His defense was beginning to crumble. He was tiring while Prince Daeron was unrelenting. Another flick of Dark Sister left behind a pool of red in Jonathan's side. The Kingsguard knight groaned. He had just finished cutting down another Mutan soldier when a blaring peal shook the battlefield. It cut through all other sounds on the battlefield. It was deafening enough to bring a sudden pause to the fighting and had both sides turning to see Robert's warhammer had connected with Hightower's chest plate. The Kingsguard knight fell backwards with a crumpled chest. Sirs Jonnet Hoare and Oswell stood rooted at the sight of their respected Lord Commander's broken body on the bloody ground. They were not alone in their shock. The sundering strike punctured the spirit of Roriger's men just as well as it had the Lord Commander's armor. These men-at-arms had probably been told there would be no fighting to arrest Roriger's brother. Something they had quickly learned to be untrue, so Hightower's death proved too much for them. The survivors began to run, retreating into the woods. Conington, who had no men left thanks to Prince Daeron, was still trying to stop the others from leaving, but he was failing. Conington, Prince Daeron called after the Stormlord, "Dark Sister still wants her kiss." He wasn't the only one who wanted the chance to fight the Lord of Griffin's Roost. "Conington!" Robert bellowed, "You traitor, I'll crush you." That proved to be the incentive Lord John Conington needed to flee with what was left of the men he had been given to arrest Roriger's brother. Sir Oswell and a wounded Dare followed, reluctantly abandoning the body of their Lord Commander with the unknown knight behind them. The remainder of their men trickled after to protect their retreat. "We should leave too," Prince Daeron turned back to them. "I'm sure my brother will be informed quickly of this little failure." Agreed. Jaime looked his friend over. "You seem to be in good spirits for a prince who was nearly arrested for treason." Daeron smiled. "I'm in good spirits because I have good friends." His expression sobered. "You have my thanks, all of you," he told them. "I did not want any of this." "We know," Cousin Robert interrupted, "we know this was not the fight you started." "No, it wasn't, but I will finish it." Daeron agreed, "But if you wish." Enough this time it was Jaime. "We're not abandoning you," he heard a murmur of agreement from the others. "We're with you to the end, my friend." "Do we need to etch it on your chest plate or pin it to your forehead?" Jaime japed, but he meant every word he said. Daeron chuckled. "No, that will not be necessary." Cersei had somehow slipped her guard and was at his side. Her hand wrapped around his arm. They made for quite the sight, his dear sister covered in the blood of her enemies while Prince Daeron had a pile of bodies at his feet. "Sir Gawain, if you follow me," Prince Daeron said to him, "you know what that will mean." "Yes, my prince." The knight sounded completely unbothered by it. "I mean, my king." He bowed his head. "It will mean a good story is about to be written in the White Book." The tournament at Harrenhal had turned into a battlefield. They were riding west, swiftly but carefully in case they were being pursued by Roriger's men. They had yet to come within sight of any of the outlying castles or roads, so their progress wasn't as ideal as they would have liked. They surprisingly had yet to come in contact with any of his father's men, who had left before them in a party which included his wife. He knew Elia would be well. Father would not let any harm come to his good daughter, especially when she was pregnant with the potential heir to the Rock. Still, it could not stop the worry from sprouting up like stubborn weeds. He did not think he would lay it to rest until he could see her with his own eyes, and have her in his arms. He looked ahead, needing a distraction, where he saw Prince Daeron. Is he still a prince or is he a king now? Jaime knew everything was changing. Roriger had seen to that. King or not, he saw his friend up ahead, riding with Robert and Cersei. The often boisterous Lord of Storm's End was more subdued while he regaled them with a story from his time in the Vale. Prince Oberyn rode right behind, sprinkling his own commentary throughout the retelling. The only one absent besides himself was Ned, who was riding beside Jaime. His friend was solemn and silent. Ned had not wanted to leave Harrenhal because of his missing siblings, with Robert being just as reluctant, but Daeron all but ordered it. He was afraid of what his brother might do if they were caught in the name of retribution. "He'll call you traitors," and he didn't need to finish for them to understand their fate if they were caught. More than once he glanced over his shoulder towards where the pillars of smoke were rising in the sky, and his grey eyes betrayed where his own heart and worries were. "They're safe, Ned." Jaime tried to comfort his friend. "I've seen your sister with a sword." He then tried to jape. "She'd surprise any man who thought her weak." "The wolf's blood," Ned said softly, "that's what my father called it." He was still looking behind. "I should go back." His grip on his reins made his knuckles go white. I can't abandon them. Lyanna and Benjen wouldn't want you to get killed. He pointed in that direction. Perhaps, Roriga puts you in the Black Cells as a hostage, or perhaps his father decides you're a traitor for thwarting Daeron's arrest. Ned sighed. He looked like he was fighting off a headache. She picked the wrong time to follow her wolf blood. Indeed, I'm just thankful my family doesn't have such a thing. I mean lion's blood. He asked, what would that even be? His friend's smile was weak, but it was there. Riders. A voice called ahead. Banners. Jaime demanded, but the question proved unnecessary since all around them, riders were appearing before them until they were now completely encircled. Daeron made a noise in the back of his throat before grumbling about finding himself being surrounded again. Form up. Jaime ordered his men into a defensive position, but the riders who approached them moved no closer besides the loose circle to envelop them. They drew no weapons. They just kept their places. No need for that, lad. Jaime turned to see the riders parting for someone, and while the voice was familiar, there was no mistaking the face. It was Sir Brynden Tully, the Blackfish. Behind him the banners of House Tully were flying by two riders. Sir Brynden. He leaned forward in his saddle looking them over. You may be good soldiers, but you're shitty scouts. He gestured to his men to break their formation. They did, before reforming behind the Blackfish in two rows. You need to be aware of your surroundings, especially now. He gave Daeron a pointed look. You are right, Sir Brynden. Daeron didn't try to argue. May I ask if there is another reason why you've come upon us besides teaching me the crafts of war? His words may have sounded sarcastic, but he wore an earnest expression while his tone remained respectful. Brynden snorted. I did. He held up a piece of parchment, but he was looking at Jaime. My brother has invited you all to Riverrun. That's where your father and wife and the rest of my brother's men are going. Lord Tully. Daeron didn't try to hide his surprise. He wants an audience with us. Yes, the Blackfish encouraged his horse to approach Jaime. When he was close enough, he handed him the folded piece of parchment. Jaime took it with a nod and opened it up. What does it say? It says don't ask questions, Jaime replied to his sister. He could feel her responding glare, but his attention was on his father's writing. It was brief, but it did include his father's seal. He's going to Riverrun. Lord Tully wants something, Jaime realized after getting over his initial confusion at such an unexpected invitation. Then we ride to Riverrun, Daeron decided before turning to Sir Brynden. We'd be honored for the escort. If you mean will you please ensure that we don't ride into an enemy's trap, then I'll take you there. The Blackfish's words were rough, but his smile belied it. Daeron chuckled. It's an honor to ride beside you again, Sir Brynden. No need for that, he waved it away. I already said I'm riding with you. Then after you, Sir Brynden. Daeron deferred to the knight. We shouldn't keep Lord Tully waiting. Barristan. It was the smoke he saw first. Barristan had seen it from his window inside the Harrenhal castle. He had been preparing to leave for the jousts, but the sight of smoke made him stop at once. This was not the smoke of campfires surrounded by festive men, eating and drinking. No, these were plumes of heavy black smoke. This was the smoke of battle. He felt something cold touch the back of his neck at that observation. Battle. It couldn't be. He tried to dismiss it since he couldn't see formations or fighting, only flames. Something was wrong. That was when he left. He was not the only one surprised by what was happening. The castle corridors were filled with panicking guards and fleeing servants. Barristan paid them no mind. He went right to where he was supposed to go. He went right to his king's chambers. It was not a long walk, but it felt like an eternity taking it. What is happening? He kept his hand on his sword. It served as his anchor to keep him from getting lost in the fear and desperation that was sweeping through the castle like a storm. It kept him from letting his thoughts carry him away towards things that were not his to think of. I am a sword. I am a knight. That was what he told himself. That was what he'd say when certain thoughts began to bubble up. He'd reduce his world to keep it all out. It's only me and my sword. The doors were in front of him. The two Targaryen guards on duty straightened up at his appearance, but before he could even reach the door, it opened to show Prince Rhaegar Targaryen walking out. My Prince Barristan bowed his head. Outside it's. I'm aware, the prince replied calmly. His tone was almost serene. What's happening? Barristan asked. Where's the king? He tried to look over Rhaegar's shoulder, but the prince blocked him, stepping aside while a bland smile came to his face. The doors promptly closed. My father is in one of his moods, Rhaegar answered delicately. He'll be leaving shortly. He is returning to the capital, where he will be safe and well looked after. What about Prince Daeron? Barristan didn't think he'd seen him since the morning tilts, and that had been hours ago. My brother. Rhaegar sighed. He has made a mistake. A mistake. The dread was growing in his stomach. What sort of mistake? He's betrayed the crown, Sir Barristan, Rhaegar answered softly. Not only that, but he's betrayed our father, our mother, Viserys, his nephew the crown prince, listed them all off, and he's betrayed me. Barristan had already been shaking his head while Rhaegar was talking. He didn't believe it. He didn't understand it. He felt something shift in his chest. He had said it so softly, he didn't think the prince could hear, but he was wrong. Me? Rhaegar sounded amused. What do you mean, Sir Barristan? Where is Prince Daeron? He's fled, Rhaegar answered. The guilty always do. I never should have come up here. That was what he heard the voice say. I should have left the castle, round towards the fighting. That's what I know. I could fight. That's how I help. This was the voice and the words he always told himself when forced to think. He always chose to look away. It's not my role, he'd say, the Game of Thrones is not my battlefield. He chose the easy thing to do. It was easier to follow an order than it was to refuse it. It was easier to comply than question. He didn't think about what he was told to do, he just did it. All the while, he'd tell himself that he was a good man, a good knight. Only now was he beginning to see how wrong he was. You did this, he shook his head. You. How long did I wait to serve the man before me? How long did I tell myself that this would be the king to serve? When Aes raped his wife, and Barristan stood outside that door, he told himself, Rhaegar will be the king to give me back my honor. Rhaegar will be the king we need. The king I need. It was all unraveling before him, and his stomach lurched painfully. I saw what I wanted to see. I wanted a great king, so I made him a great king, but he isn't. He was looking at Rhaegar, at the prince who he thought would be a great king, one of the greatest, but seeing him now he saw none of that. There was no pride or hope. He just felt sick. Why are you doing this? Barristan's head began to pound, but he pushed away the pain. You could not possibly understand, Rhaegar gently chided him, if he was a child and not a knight of the Kingsguard. The prophecy. Barristan in his heart knew the answer before he ever asked. You'd risk everything over the words of some woods witch. When he said the words out loud, he realized just how ridiculous it all sounded that he actually laughed. Rhaegar's mouth formed a thin line. I would not expect a knight to understand the burdens of the crown. His voice had gone colder. He could have been your Aemon Dragon Knight, but instead you made him your demon Blackfyr. Something angry flashed across Rhaegar's face at Barristan's words, before it was smoothed away. Will you stand with me, Sir Barristan? No, my prince. He undid the clasps of his white cloak. I will not. The fabric fell to the ground. The guards in front of him were pulling out their swords. Barristan's was already out of its sheath when Rhaegar's voice stopped them all. No, the Crown Prince ordered, sheathe your swords. He told his guards before turning back to him. He saw his confusion since a small smile played on his lips. I'm not a fool. I order these men forward and you'll kill them without breaking a sweat. He ignored the shifting of his guards. It was hard to tell if they were relieved or insulted by Rhaegar's observation. You saved my father once. I did. Barristan had thought he had done the right thing. He had saved his king. Then he'd stand outside his chambers and hear the queen's whimpering, or he stood in the throne room watching men consumed by green flames. I should have failed, a dangerous thought and a secret he told no one. Rhaegar would have become king. That was what he told himself. Those words watering the seeds of doubt that were rooting in his heart. And all would have been better, but now. He looked up at Rhaegar Targaryen. I was wrong to think that. A life for a life, Sir Barristan. You saved my father, so I will save yours. He looked at the prince carefully. You will let me leave even if I go to your brother? Yes, but know this, Rhaegar answered simply, I will not offer this again, Sir Barristan. There will be no clemency once my brother and his allies are stopped. If you wish to throw away the gift I give you, then so be it. I do. He didn't hesitate. Rhaegar pointed past Barristan, then go. He did, and he never looked back. Barristan had not gotten too far when he heard the shouting. He was trying to leave this cursed and ruined castle when he stopped at the sound. It wasn't far. He looked down the corridor, and was certain they were near. He kept going forward, this time more alert. It was when he heard the second shout did he know which door to open, and he did. He saw two boys, one was on the floor, the other was standing in front of him to protect him from the two guards approaching them. The boy tried to stop them, but one of the guards pushed him to the ground. The guards were laughing. That was all Barristan needed to see before sliding into the room. His sword was already out and was through the first guard before the men knew what had happened. They weren't laughing now. What the? Barristan's sword interrupted that question when he put his sword through the second man's throat. He let out a wet gasp. His eyes widened before his body stilled. The body crumpled in a heap when he withdrew his sword. He was about to turn to the boys he saved, but the yellow tunics the men were wearing stopped him. There was something familiar to them. Old memories were bubbling up of battles fought long ago. He checked their arms, and that confirmed his suspicion. He saw one man had 7 golden arm rings clamped to his left arm while the other man had 5. The Golden Company. He hadn't seen their ilk since the Stepstones. He didn't, but Barristan already knew his answer of what the Crown Prince was capable of before he was interrupted. Sir Barristan. The voice was of a woman, which made him pause. He turned to the two boys on the floor to discover, one of them wasn't a boy. She was only dressed as one. In dirty brown trousers and a muddy grey tunic, Lyanna Stark was getting to her feet. She looked tired and sad. She had been the one who had gotten shoved. The boy beside her he recognized as her brother, Benjen. Lady Lyanna. Barristan looked between them and then the Golden Company sellswords on the ground. What happened? There was redness around her eyes. We were taken. Prince Rhaegar. Barristan could not believe how far the prince was falling. Yes, she answered in a snarl that would have made the Stark sigil proud. They found us. She hesitated, some of the fire leaving her eyes, and she paused, looking anywhere but at them. They took Howland. Benjen's voice cracked. They found us with the gear. Gear. The gear for the Night of the Laughing Tree, Benjen answered. That was him. Barristan never would have thought the Crannog men capable of such a feat. No, I was the Mystery Knight. There was no pride in Lyanna Stark's admission, only pain. Barristan decided it would be better if he didn't show his dismay at her confession despite feeling it. He could sense the pain and anger lurking beneath the surface. It was ready to lash out like a hungry wolf. When they found us with the gear, they demanded to know which of us was the Mystery Knight, Benjen explained. Howland stepped forward and told them it was him. To protect us. Lyanna's voice hitched. He told me she bit her lip. He told me she stopped a second time to take a breath. He told me it was his duty as a Stark bannerman. She couldn't finish. He remembered Aerys wrath towards the Knight of the Laughing Tree as well as the king's certainty that he was an enemy of the crown. Barristan did not need to ask what happened to their friend, because he knew what happened to those Aerys was convinced were his enemies. A bright, green flash flickered across his vision of the many memories of him standing silently while guilty men were condemned. I will not be that man anymore. But they still took us. Benjen protested. They promised they'd release us after Prince Daeron was arrested. They didn't want us to warn them. We must go. He couldn't save their friend, but he could save them. Quickly grab those cloaks and use the hoods too. He doubted Rhaegar would remain generous if Barristan was caught sneaking out the two Starks. We need to leave. Where? Lady Lyanna's tone remained suspicious despite Barristan freeing her and her brother. We're going to find horses. He was relieved they at least listened to him by putting on the cloaks. But where are we going? This time it was her brother. He pulled his hood up. "We are riding west." He was about to add that we're riding to find Prince Daeron, but he stopped himself because he knew what was to come. "We're riding to find King Daeron." Notes. Just to be clear, in this story Rhaegar was not trying to use Lyanna to try to fulfill the prophecy. At this point he's certain that his wife will do it. She's pregnant with their second child and he has no reason to believe it isn't her. He is making some risky short-term choices. B/C. He's confident in his long-term goals. BC of his conviction in destiny and prophesies. He didn't want to fight his brother. That is why he tried to subdue him by arresting him before it could get to fighting. Sadly, his plans are not working out like he envisioned. Thanks for the awesome support. If you liked what you read, it would mean a lot to me if you commented. Until next time. Spectre for Hire. Chapter 33, Respite. Notes. Thanks for your support and patience. Sometimes real life gets in the way. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 281 AC. Cersei. Why are we here? Cersei relaxed herself within the tub that the Tullys had provided for her. She had been traveling on the road unable to really properly wash herself, so she had gotten used to her appearance. She had even started to like it. These red stains showed the fate of those who thought they could take me. They tried not to just take my freedom, but they tried to wrench me from him. She wouldn't forget the wet, strangled gasp of the first man she killed in that fight. His eyes wide in fright in those last flickering heartbeats, staring in helpless horror as she plunged the dagger into his throat. The blood had felt warmer than this bath water. Her arms had been scrubbed clean, her neck, her face, her legs. The remaining red remnants of her victory were washed away. The evidence of my triumph, the show of my strength. Her dress had been a testament to her will. The blood stains of her enemies made her dress a tapestry displaying her skill, but that too had been taken away from her. It had been ripped and stained, but she thought the blood splatters brought out the crimson in her ruined dress, but it was tossed away like a dirty rag. Soaps and oils had been applied to her and the water, adding flowery scents to the air and to her skin. She raised her hand out of the water, watching the water spill out between her fingers. She examined her nails to see they had cleaned them too. They cannot take my memories. They cannot scrub it away with soaps and sponges. She ripped the dagger out of her first kill with an awkward twist of her body to escape the other assailant's grasping hand. She nearly lost her balance in the movement, but her practicing footwork saved her, and doomed him. She put all of her anger into the thrust before driving the dagger into the man's gut. He coughed and gagged, cried and gaped. The blood started as a trickle, slipping past her dagger, before she gave the weapon a relentless tug to wrench it free, then the wound became a crimson torrent. Splash! Her hand hit the water harder than she intended. It was so sudden that it startled the attendants in her room. The noise was a knife that had cut through their mindless chatter. "My lady!" One of them called out to her. She raised a hand to wave away their concern. They didn't persist and went back to their work and prattle. She had dismissed them from personally attending her with the bath, after they had finished with her hair. She wanted a moment of peace without being grabbed, touched, or scrubbed. "I shouldn't be here." She leaned her head back against the cushioned pillow. "I should be with him." Cersei looked at her leg that dangled out of the tub. The cool air was a refreshing kiss against her bare and wet skin. "It should be him who is in here with me." She was resentful for this poor company forced upon her. "Daeron would tell me. He wouldn't hide me away." That spurred her to stir out of her bath. She stood without shame or shyness, feeling the water dribbling down off her, splattering back down into the tub and around the surrounding floor. He'd listened to her words, "We should be going to the west to raise my family's banners." They could not be safe or settled until they were back at the rock. Her eyes settled on a pair of tully trouts that were in the stonework above the hearth. "We should be amongst lions, not fish." A servant made a surprised squeak. "My lady. Is my gown ready?" "Yes, my lady, Beau." Cersei knew they had some excuse or order they were about to parrot, so she cut her off. "Then I will wear it." She carefully stepped out of the tub. One of her attendants rushed forward with a towel to begin to wipe her down, but she moved with hesitation that made Cersei think she'd be stuck in this chamber all day. I'll do it. She felt their envious eyes upon her form while she dried herself off. Yes, I'm beautiful as well as powerful. That will be all she told them, tired of their presence. They wisely listened. One by one they curtsied and left. Her dress was simple and her hair was still wet, but she didn't care. She didn't have time for frivolity, not now. I've waited long enough. Besides, I want answers, not compliments. Why are we here? It was probably not the first words that should have come out of her mouth upon finding him. She came in like an angry burst of wind, spotting him by the hearth, sitting in a cushioned chair. There was a glass of wine at his elbow on a table that bore carved tully trouts, but his drink looked untouched. Daeron took her sudden appearance and demand with a small smile. He rose from his seat. We were invited. He then looked her over, but there was no disapproval in his eyes at her damp hair and drab gown. His eyes were so warm she could feel a spark begin to burn in her chest from his gaze. She wanted to smile at his wit, cherish his handsome face, to embrace him, but her impatience made her too prickly. Your brother tried to arrest you. He did. Daeron's smile tightened. We should be going west, Daeron, she implored him. We should be raising my father's bannermen. She feared the moment would be stolen from them, and a cry would soon come from the walls that Roriger's men or the king's had followed them here. That they were now stuck inside a castle that was not their own. The Tullys were neither friends or family. They may have given them bread and salt, but trouts tend to swim away, not stand and fight. We could find allies in these halls, Cersei. He walked across his chambers with his glass of wine, but didn't drink from it until he reached the table. We've been given bread and salt. He took a long sip as if to further prove his point. Meanwhile, my brother will be riding back to the capital, my father too. To call their banners. She felt her heart hammering in her chest. The anticipation and anxiety were twin hammers that would not let her stay calm or comfortable. They will come for us. They will come for me. They can't have you, she growled, a wave of red flickering across her vision. Cersei could almost feel the warm splatter against her face from those who had already tried to take him from her. He's mine. We should leave. She didn't like this notion of waiting and talking while the Mad King and his equally mad heir were hatching their own dangerous schemes. Your father and brother are speaking with their bannermen who attended the tournament. They are. She tried to hide her frown at not being told this. Jaime and I both fought, but he's given the honor to plan while I was forced to wash. Yes, he must have seen something in her expression since he approached her. I'm sorry, I thought you knew. His fingers brushed some of her damp hair away. No, she willed her voice to sound fierce. It must be a roar and never a whimper. I didn't. I was confined to a tub. Why aren't you with them? She thought he should be or with Robert and Ned and Oberyn or even Lord Tully. She thought he should be doing something, but he hadn't been when she found him. She didn't understand, especially since she heard the whispers and some of the men in how they addressed her betrothed. They called Daeron, king. It wasn't a word one said lightly. It wasn't a title Daeron had sought, but now it was being thrust upon him. We cannot be left alone in Summerhall, so now Roriger will risk it all. The other word so often spoken with king, didn't bring the giddy joy it did when she was younger. When it was all she ever wanted, to be queen. There was none of that burning desire that had consumed her so thoroughly for too many years. When she thought of her and Daeron together, it wasn't in front of the Iron Throne in the Great Hall as King and Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, but in a September with a Septon in front of them. He wasn't coronating them, but marrying them. We're being called husband and wife. It was a pleasing thought of a promising future that Roriger was determined to steal from them. I've spoken to them, including your father. His words broke through her musings. And she despised being the last to know. It felt like a weakness she could never shield herself from. It will be at the Rock, our wedding, and all that will follow. If it meets with your approval. It does, she answered. It does. She was repeating herself, but she didn't care because she was so unbelievably happy that they were so close to what she wanted. It was only when her own frustration began to fade could she see how much this was all starting to affect him. The tension in his shoulders, the weary wrinkle across his brow, the uncertainty that lurked within the depths of his eyes. The tight grip in which he was holding his glass, or the nervous clenching and unclenching of his free hand. I was a selfish, blind fool. She cursed herself. I complained and ranted while he's drowning in front of me. He needed my hand, but I gave him my fist. She kissed him then, wanting to take it all away from him or at least to distract him from the endless worries that cropped around him like summer weeds. It was searing, but all too short because of a sudden and unwanted knock on the door. Prince Daeron. It was an unfamiliar voice to her ears, but that didn't stop her from focusing all of her ire at this unseen attendant who interrupted them. Lord Hoster Tully is ready for you. Thank you. His eyes were on her when he added, we'll be ready shortly. They weren't led to Lord Tully's solar or to his hall, but to a pair of chambers that looked to not have received many guests over the years. One of the tapestries that remained hanging on the stone walls was a large cloth of red, but with the top and bottom being blue to resemble waves of a river with smaller trouts stitched to appear as if they were swimming in it. Lord Tully was waiting for them by the open doors that led out to a high stone balcony. He was as tall as her father. His hair wasn't as red as his daughter's. It was more rust-colored with some grey beginning to intrude. The beard that covered his cheeks and chin was the same color. He had blue, shrewd eyes, and was smiling when he saw them. He dipped his head in greeting, Prince Daeron. He then raised his eyes to regard her, and Lady Cersei. He gestured for them to join him on the balcony. It is a lovely day, please. Thank you, Lord Tully Daeron replied. They took 2 seats across from him. The chairs were cushioned, the sunlight was warm against her skin. The Lord of Riverrun was right about it being a lovely day. The rush of water below them was a soothing sound. Unseen birds could be heard twittering to one another. Wine. Lord Tully offered. Servants were standing and waiting for their orders. They accepted. The vintage was local and unfamiliar to her, but the taste was pleasant. Her first sip had been small. It was polite and cautious, prepared to give a pretty smile to hide her distaste for bad wine. The second sip was longer, settling herself more comfortably into her surroundings. Lady Cersei, you are a lovely surprise, Hoster said to her once the 3 of them were alone. She smiled at him. I hope it is a welcome one. It is, he assured her. I kept my cat by my side for years, letting her lead and learn. She was my heir until Edmure was born to us. He is young, but my cat is a good teacher, he boasted. It will be a sad day when I must remove the Tully maiden cloak from her shoulders. I doubt you'd weep tears of sorrow if the trout cloak was replaced with a dragon one, she suspected. Lull us here with your interest of friendship, all the while securing your eldest daughter's hand to a Targaryen prince. The thought struck her with a sudden sharpness that made her nearly wince. My prince. She unintentionally tightened her grip on Daeron, causing him to look her way. She answered his inquisitive gaze with a smile. It wasn't like the one she had just given Lord Tully. This smile was something true. It wasn't a polite veneer for her to hide behind, but a telling way to show her appreciation for him. Lord Tully spoke up. We are honored to host you. It has been some time since my family has had so many great and noble families behind our walls and beneath our roof. I'm grateful. Daeron made no mention of his own family. I imagine Daeron's family would be grateful to the Tullys if they delivered him to the gates of the Red Keep. She tried to soften the sour feeling in her stomach with more wine. I do not plan on intruding on your hospitality for too long, my lord, Daeron said. Riverrun has proven a welcomed reprieve, but I have other matters to attend to. I understand Lord Tully didn't sound offended that he'd be seeing them depart so soon, nor was he insistent that they try to stay longer. Especially in regards to the rumors that are coming out of Harrenhal. They are rather concerning. He paused as if waiting for them to object or react, but when she and Daeron didn't in the way he was expecting, he continued. It is said you've committed treason against the crown. You and your party killed many men, including the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Rhaegar killed those men when he sent them to try to arrest Daeron. She'd not shy away from who the blame should be given to. The charges were false. She'd not allow her or Daeron's name to be tarnished by these lies. They carry the authority of the Iron Throne. That cannot be ignored. Hoster Tully neither looked convinced at her argument or truly invested in Rhaegar's. The law of the 7 kingdoms, the royal authority, the High Septon, all of the displays of power are with your brother, Prince Daeron. I'm well aware of my brother's advantage. Daeron's tone was beginning to sharpen. In the eyes of the small folk and the 7 kingdoms, you will be seen as a rebel, a usurper. Roriger will send out ravens and riders to tell his tale, and it will be a compelling one, of a jealous younger brother trying to take what was not his. How he was caught and fled like a guilty man, but not before striking down many loyal men to the crown, Hoster observed rather politely despite the dark observations. You cannot dismiss the power that will wield. You, the greedy and grasping second coming of Demon Blackfear, and him, the loyal prince defending his father and the realm. Daeron scoffed before rising out of his seat. You do not need to remind me of the affection my brother holds in the heart of so many. The small folk, the capital, the 7 kingdoms, how they adore my brother, their precious silver prince. Cersei couldn't forget all the applause and adulation Roriger received during the tournament at Harrenhal. Oh, how he presents himself as some benevolent being. She had moved to join Daeron, placing her hand on her prince's shoulder. Anyone could look promising if compared solely to the Mad King. That was the folly, she thought, the trap everyone fell into. It was a failing she knew all too well. On the outside to them all, Roriger would have looked perfect, but he was rotting from the inside out. If you truly believe or respect the might of the Iron Throne, then why did you invite us to your castle? Cersei asked, giving only a flickering look to their host. Curiosity, Hoster answered mildly, to see how close we really are. She didn't believe that. We're here for his amusement and ambition. She knew what he wanted. He'll hear our words, but he'll not commit until he hears what the Iron Throne will offer. Daeron sighed. We're only this close because my brother insists on shoving me towards a confrontation I didn't want. You blame Roriger and he blames you. Hoster sounded almost amused, as if he was a father mediating between his children and not a lord paramount between 2 feuding princes. Daeron didn't make an effort to return to his seat. He remained standing across the sitting Lord of Riverrun. My brother refuses to respect the betrothal our father has made with Lord Tywin Lannister. All this bickering over betrothals. He let out a soft chuckle that wasn't mirthful. You're holding up a looking glass and directing it back at me, Prince Daeron. All I can see is my brother and myself, and the rows we had over this very issue. His tone sobered. However, we only exchanged shouts and curses. The direction yours is taking is much more dangerous. I am aware of that, Daeron acknowledged, but now that I have been put on this path, Lord Tully, I cannot ignore what else I see. My father's madness only worsens, and my brother's fascination with prophecies is leading my family towards our own annihilation. Daeron went over to retrieve his wine glass, which he then proceeded to empty in one sip. I cannot allow that. Hoster's eyebrows rose at those revealing words. You have powerful friends. He began to list them: Lannister, Martell, Baratheon, raising a finger with each family he mentioned. These are great and strong houses, but I caution you, do not count on men that have yet to be raised. You doubt the loyalty of my father's bannermen. Cersei understood his implication and its insult, intended or not. The Westerlands follow House Lannister and no other, she declared proudly. He held up his hands in a placating gesture. I mean no insult, Lady Cersei. His tone almost sounded sincere to her ears. You mean many things, she suspected. He comes to them as their host to offer friendly counsel, but she saw through it. He puts down Daeron's friends to likely lift his own family. Oh, do not rely on Baratheon or Lannister, he'd caution, but you can rely on me. He'd say it simply and kindly, and then he'd slip in the need for his eldest daughter to have a husband. Thank you, Lord Hoster, for this enlightening discourse. Daeron was more polite than she wished to be. You've given me much to think about. He held out his hand for her, which she happily took, while making sure that Lord Tully saw it too. Daeron didn't speak again until they were outside the chambers with his own guards walking with them. Lord Tully will not be hasty, he said. We do not have the luxury of time like he does. We must act. We must leave. When? She didn't protest. This castle was an obstacle that she wanted to clear. Past here, we ride to the Rock. Mother and Tyrion were waiting for her. She missed her brother dearly, her mother too. It had been months since she last saw them, but it was more than just family waiting for her. At the Rock I will become his wife. A rush of warmth spread through her at that declaration. As soon as we can. Lyanna. It was hard to sleep. The dreams were always the same. No, not dreams, she corrected herself. Dreams would have been easier. They weren't real. Dreams were lies and hopes and fears, but they would always dispel like a cold breath. You could see or remember them for a while, but then they'd turn into nothingness, a fuzzy image that you couldn't quite remember. I'll never forget Howland's sacrifice. She turned her face over into her pillow, muffling a sob that tore through her like a harsh blizzard. I served House Stark. He was small and solemn, determined to do his duty for her family. He picked up the shield knowing it wouldn't be used for defense but a condemnation for something he didn't do. Another sob followed, her hands were shaking while her pillow attempted to muffle the mournful sound that was being wrung from her. She counted a few more seconds before she turned over, letting out a breath that turned into a hiccup. Her eyes stung with tears, wetness smeared against her cheeks. She scrubbed them away with the back of her hand. Lyanna should have known a soft bed wouldn't have helped her. For the first time since she left the tournament with Sir Barristan and her brother, they were staying in a keep under a lord's protection. They had rode fast and tirelessly through the Riverlands wilderness once they fled Harrenhal. That had been days ago. They stopped only for their horses and short rests for themselves. They had arrived at the Golden Tooth that day. The castle was accommodating to their unannounced guests. The Lefords had put a Castellan in charge of the keep since they and much of their household had gone to Harrenhal to attend the tournament. They hadn't returned, nor had there been sight or word from the Lannisters who were expected to pass through on their return to Casterly Rock. She slipped out of her bed knowing restful sleep would not come to her. The only lights in her room was a sliver of moonbeams coming through a window since she had only partially closed the curtains. The small hearth in her very small room had a fading orange glow. She padded over to the chair in front of the fire. The cloth of her borrowed gown was scratchy against her skin. When they fled Harrenhal she didn't have any of her clothes, so she had been wearing the same grey tunic and dark trousers for days. Here, she was offered some clothes which included this old sleeping gown that she was wearing. I was so eager to participate, so proud with every victory I earned. She stared sullenly into the dying orange glaze of the fire. They cheered for me, thinking I was a man, some great unknowing knight. It had been almost impossible for her to stop smirking that night when all anyone was talking about was her, or as they called her, the Knight of the Laughing Tree. The cloth scratched at her arms. She fidgeted in her seat, adjusting her gown as she did, trying to alleviate the annoying discomfort it was having on her. She didn't tell Ned who she was. Lyanna suspected he'd not find it charming or courageous but foolish. He'd frown and insist she stop before she got hurt or was exposed. I should have told him. Lyanna nearly told Robert. It was a temptation that only grew while she sat beside him listening to him that supper as he tried to guess who it was. A time or two she had to turn a snicker into a cough or cover her mouth to hide her amusement at his poor attempts. "It's me, Robert." She'd tell him. Lyanna didn't think Robert would scold or worry. He'd burst out laughing. It was enough to make her smile in the dark, wistfully wondering how it would have played out. His face hovered in front of her, he was grinning while his bright blue eyes shined like twin stars. Seeing his handsome visage and thinking of his charming laugh brought a sudden sensation within her chest. I should have told them. The sensation was quickly snuffed by her guilt. Howland paid the price for my pride. Lyanna, Howland's voice seemed to call to her. She ran her hands up her arms trying to smooth her gown sleeves from pricking at her skin like fingernails. I just wanted to teach them respect and honor. It should have ended there, but it didn't. The memory of that fateful day swirling all around her, trying to pull her down like a raging whirlpool. It wasn't supposed to be like this, the guilt caught her in churning waters. I just wanted to defend Howland. When they told me that Aerys wanted the Mystery Knight, she should have confessed to them then. Ned, Robert, Prince Daeron, they would have helped me, protect me, but she convinced herself that she was protecting them by not telling. Lyanna thought the fewer who knew the less likely that the Mad King would discover her and learn the truth. They found us in a clearing. I never should have gone back. She felt herself shaking like she was standing on the deck of a boat sailing through a storm. She pulled her legs up and then hugged them, trying to stop her trembling. The Crown Prince had been surrounded by a dozen men, but there was no white cloak amidst them. She had never been so close to Prince Rhaegar. She remembered trying to watch him joust during the tournament. She had been impressed by how good he was, at how many good men he took down. Lyanna had thought it difficult for this prince to be the Mad King's son. He seemed everything Aerys wasn't, but she was wrong, So very wrong. He just hides his madness better than his father. It was me. Howland declared to the prince and his men, I was the knight. Lyanna rested her chin on her knees. The gun continued to prick away, pinching and scratching at her. I wanted to teach those squires respect, but I was the one taught the lasting lesson. It was playing out in front of her with painful clarity. She was struck by how quickly it all came crumbling down around her. Lyanna tightened her grip around her legs, but it could not deter the shivering that went through her. The tears were cold as they trickled down her cheeks, blurring her vision. My father is a sick man. I've tried my best to tend to him, but this tournament has not agreed with him. Roriger had sighed. It's pained me to watch him only worsen these past few days, and when we learned we had reason to believe that the mystery knight may be working for my brother. The crown prince had gestured for one of his men to come forward. It's undone him. Lyanna pulled at the sleeves, the irritation only worsened. She wanted to slip it off and toss it into the fire. It was all over, threatening to consume her, these burning scratches that were reaching and hurting her in places where the gun wasn't even touching her. Make it stop. She wanted to scream into the darkness. These invisible itches that were unrelenting in their torment. Lyanna. She didn't look up, thinking it was the memory leaking through. She looked down at her arms, but saw no red marks. What's happening? Lyanna. The second time the voice sounded muffled. She stirred in her seat, facing the door just as her name was said for the third time. Benjen. He took that as permission to open the door. Entering before Lyanna could protest, she saw his wide smile. What is it? Prince Daeron's party sent a rider ahead. They'll be here shortly and Ned's with them. Truly. Lyanna knew the hour was late, but she wasn't about to wonder or complain about her brother riding in it if it meant she'd be seeing him so soon. We have to greet them. She was already grabbing a borrowed robe. She wiped at her cheeks when she saw Benjen's brief, but knowing look. Have you told Sebaristan? He knows. Then let's go. She felt herself smiling for the first time since that morning at Harrenhal before everything changed. You didn't kill Howland. Ashura's tone was both comforting and assertive. They were sitting on Lyanna's bed. The morning sun was new and bright along the blue sky. She tried to correct her good sister, but Ashura would not hear of it. You didn't. She repeated, firmly. Ned had gone to have a word with Daeron and Ashura had decided to use that time to check on her. Lyanna was thankful for her good sister's intentions and presence. They had only arrived at the Golden Tooth a few hours ago. It had been a tearful reunion. Lyanna would not forget the relief on her brother's face when he saw her and Benjen waiting for him or the fierce embraces that followed. Roriger killed Howland. Ashura said, Eris killed Howland. She took Lyanna's hands in hers, but not you. Lyanna opened her mouth to try to argue, but thought better of it. She sighed and gave a weak nod. She wanted to believe it, but part of her couldn't. It was my fault. I dragged him into it. It was me. The tingling sensation returned. She scratched her arms, gritting her teeth. How was Riverrun? Her brother and Ashura's stay in Riverrun had barely been talked about. It had been a simple mention that they had made after Ned had revealed their own harrowing escape from Harrenhal, which included saving Prince Daeron from getting arrested and a bloody skirmish. Brief. Ashura flashed a small smile. It was for a possible alliance. Lyanna stiffened. The itching was forgotten at the mention of betrothals, fearing her own fate. She remembered her father had already reached out to Riverrun about a possible match between her and Lord Tully's son and heir, Ed Muir. Had Lord Tully decided for it? It was a disquieting thought. I'm being offered up as a sacrifice because of Brandon's dishonor. You are not betrothed. Ashura noticed her discomfort. He hasn't forgiven Brandon's insult to his dearly loved daughter, so I do not believe Lord Tully is interested in any future alliances between your families. She didn't hide her relief at her good fortune, which earned a small smile from her good sister. So what did he want? He wants great matches for both his eldest daughter and for his heir. Ashura said. He did show interest in a possible match between Caitlin and Robert. Lyanna felt something sink in her chest. She tried to look uninterested, but she felt her good sister's scrutinizing gaze on her. When Lyanna looked up to meet it, she saw the knowing smile on Ashura's lips. She resisted the urge to scowl. It doesn't bother me. Robert asked after me, and I said no. She tried to tell herself, if he wishes to marry Lady Caitlin then so be it. The words were hollow and were unable to numb the ache she found nestling inside her. Are they betrothed? No, they're not. Lyanna found herself turning her head to try to hide this sudden relief upon learning there was no betrothal. The act itself was all that was needed to condemn her, but Ashura didn't comment on it. She instead was talking more about their respite in Riverrun and about the Tullys. She focused on her good sister's voice to help distract her from certain and confusing thoughts about the Lord of Storm's End. Lord Tully has to be careful in whom he chooses. Some of his most powerful bannermen are already backing Prince Roriger, Ashura was saying. If he supports Prince Daeron and he loses, then he risks losing everything, since Roriger will be inclined to reward a loyal Riverland house with the coveted title of Lord Paramount of the Trident. The door suddenly opened, breaking their conversation. Ned was in the doorway. Ned, what is it? Ashura's voice held a growing tinge of worry to it. Robert is riding to the Stormlands to rally his bannermen for King Daeron, he answered. I'll be accompanying him. She wasn't sure why she was seeking him out. Liar. The voice inside was quick to denounce. The Golden Tooth may have been a small castle, but it was not one that Lyanna was familiar with. She walked through the corridor hoping this was the right direction. She had only stopped to get Benjen and one other thing that was now secretly tucked away. Her borrowed dress swishing below her waist. It was blue silk with a few yellow suns sewn into the dress that resembled flowers. She had to accept what was offered to her by the ladies of House Lefford, even though she would have preferred borrowing from the boys and men, tunics and shirts over gowns and dresses. Liar. Benjen wheezed behind her. His footfalls pattered against the stone floor, trying to keep up with her pace. She ignored him, turning left when the corridor split. This should be the right one, she hoped. It was a dead end. A short corridor with 3 doors, one on the right, one on the left, and one right in front of her. It was the one in front of her she was eyeing. She came to a halt before she could even reach the doorknob. Her heart seemed to make a small tumble in her chest. Thanks for waiting. Benjen came up beside her. Lyanna didn't respond to her brother's sarcasm. She just looked at the closed door. Her fingers fidgeting at her side. The tumbling only worsened in her chest, making her feel suddenly nauseous, but she tried to push down that unhelpful feeling. Liar. Her brother snapped his fingers. Wait out here, she ordered. She had made up her mind and went to the door. What? He called after her. His insistence stopped when she looked over her shoulder and glared at him. I'll wait outside, he quickly agreed. She felt a ripple go through her when her fingers touched the doorknob. It wasn't anxiousness or nerves, but what she would call excitement. That fluttering feeling that clings to you before doing something daring and new. It stayed with her when she knocked and only intensified when she was permitted entrance. Lyanna took a breath, preparing herself as if she was plunging into the hot springs at Winterfell. She could hear Benjen's voice and encouraging words, but they seemed so far away, and then the door was opening and she went in. Lady Lyanna. Robert Baratheon didn't hide his surprise upon seeing that she was his unannounced guest. She assumed he was expecting a castle servant or one of his guards. This is unexpected. It wasn't disappointment or excitement in his tone, just confusion. Her eyes took in his appearance while her mouth remained unmoving. He was dressed for the long ride ahead of him. He was dressed mostly in black, tunic, trousers, and riding boots. He wore an onyx pin in the shape of a stag to hold his gold-colored riding cloak in place. He was tall and handsome, and she could see the outlines of his muscles beneath his shirt. She felt a curl of warmth bloom inside her. Lord Robert, she said, my brother told me of your plans. Many Storm Lords have gone to the capital. His jaw was clenched. I swore my loyalty, my sword, and my life to my cousin, my king. He didn't settle his gaze on her. I must go to Storm's End to rally my bannermen who've remained loyal to the Baratheons and punish those who've broken their oaths. One of his large hands closed into a fist. I hope to make Connington my first example. It went unsaid between them what it was that was about to happen. What him and her brother were really riding into, and all that would follow. She was still reeling from the death of her friend, Howland. Lyanna ignored the slight itch that seemed to creep up her arm. Now, I must watch my brother ride off to war. Her stomach clenched while cold tendrils of dread stirred at the thought of all she could lose. Lyanna looked at Robert, picturing ugly streaks of red seeping into his black tunic. Slashes carved across his chest, weeping blood. Lyanna suppressed the shudder that came through her like an autumn storm. What about the rock? She found herself proposing, knowing it was foolish. Lyanna didn't want the image of that wounded and dying Robert to settle in her mind. She knew that Casterly Rock was nothing but a temporary balm to her since she knew he'd only have to eventually leave there, her brother too. Robert shook his head. I can't do my cousin any good at the rock. What about me? She almost said, but felt her courage abandon her before the words could slip past her lips. I'm sorry about Howland. He looked unsure if it was something he should speak of, which made his apology sound awkward, but it didn't diminish his sincerity. Thank you. She scratched at her arm when the itching threatened to reappear. I don't deserve any apologies. I killed him. Her pain and guilt must have been plain to see given the growing concern coming over his expression. His eyes were so blue and she saw the fondness lurking beneath them, which only fanned the warmth inside her. I heard you may be betrothed. Lyanna felt the rough strip of wool pressing against her arm, hidden beneath the blue sleeves of her dress. Yes, to Lady Caitlin. I've spoken to Lord Tully about it. There was an odd note in his voice. But you can't, she blurted out in protest, because you're already betrothed. She didn't hesitate, to me. He frowned. He was watching her warily. I asked after you and your possible interest, he said slowly. His voice was guarded. You said no. She nearly winced at having it thrown back at her, but Lyanna didn't fault him or his reaction. She earned it. She wouldn't falter now. I've reconsidered, she confessed, if you'll have me, that is. There was only silence. It was unexpected and it made the worry grip her heart like an icy claw. The band around her arm felt like an iron shackle. The hope was draining out of her heart like an emptying pitcher. It felt like eternity waiting in front of him in those quiet seconds that followed. It was the smile she noticed first. His blue eyes were bright and warm, thawing the coldness that had tried to chain her heart. She felt her own lips begin to twitch watching him cut the distance between them, and before she could react, she felt his hands around her and then she was in the air. Flying, the laugh bubbled out of her when he lifted her off of the floor. Her protests broke into peals of laughter, finding the feeling thrilling while he spun her. Her cheeks were warm and her heart was soaring higher than she was. Lyanna looked down at the man she wished to marry. His eyes were sparkling while a smile was dancing on his lips. Lyak. Benjen stuck his head inside, puncturing the blissful mood that had enveloped her and Robert. Benjen. She was swiftly put down, much to her disappointment and annoyance. Happy. Lyanna didn't wait for her brother's answer before going to the door, pushing herself against it. Ignoring Benjen's sputtering before his head slipped out and the door closed behind her. She leaned against it, trying to catch her breath. I will write to your father, Robert said, returning to the proper show of decorum after her brother's untimely interruption. I will too, she was certain he would accept. I want to marry him, father, she'd write, words she hadn't thought to ever write or say when she had first met the man in front of her, but he had surprised her. He had shown her a life she didn't think she'd have as a lord's wife. He offered her respect and freedom, when she had so long feared marriage could only restrain her. Robert, from what I said before. I understand. He held up a hand to stop her. I won't let any storms come between us. He swore earnestly. She nodded, finding herself wanting to believe him with all of her being. Please, Robert, I know it can be dismissed, but it would hurt me too much, she confessed, seeing his expression beginning to crack at the tremor in her tone. Her fears halted when she felt his large, calloused hands then close around hers. I am yours. His voice was a quiet rumble like the sound of distant thunder. I am yours. You are mine. She found herself repeating the sentiment, believing him. I have something. Her hands reluctantly slipped from his grip. She went to her arm where it was hidden and tied. It isn't much. She wanted to prepare him before she opened her hand to show it to him. It was a rough strip of fabric. It was dirty and grey wool. She had crudely and hastily ripped it from her old tunic. The one she had been wearing when Sabaristan found her and Benjen, and every day since until they arrived at the Golden Tooth. It was the only stark-colored garment she had since everything else she brought was left behind at Harrenhal. It's nothing really. He took it from her hand, admiring it as if it was spun from gold. "No, my lady. This means everything." Notes. Lioness scratching / itching stems from her stress / guilt / anxiety with Howland's death. That last scene with Lionel and Robert was rewritten more times than I could count. It was always planned, but when it came time to write it, I didn't like anything I wrote or rewrote, but after so many tries, I knew I had to just release as is or this chapter would never get published. So I hope it doesn't suck too much for you guys. Robert and Lionel are not technically betrothed, because this is Asoyaf and things are done in a certain way. Lionel was just making her intentions clear on what she wanted to happen between them. So now that they are on the same page, they'll both be writing to her father hoping / waiting for him to accept it. We'll see Barristan and Daeron together and some other interesting stuff will play out at Casterly Rock, but first we must pay a visit to the capital. If you liked the chapter then please comment. It would mean a lot to me. Until next time. Spectre for Hire. Chapter 34, Incur. Notes. Warning, the second half of this chapter contains references / mentions and a very brief depiction of domestic abuse and sexual assault. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 281 AC. Arthur. He's trying to steal my son's birthright. That will not happen, Princess Lord Mace Tyrell tried his best to soothe her. The Reach stands with you. The sitting Lord of Highgarden added. Arthur didn't speak. That wasn't his purpose here. Even if it was, what could I say? He once thought and would deny that Roriger's brother wanted the throne, but he had been proven the fool. Before Harrenhal, Roriger showed me the truth. He was grateful that he did not hold Arthur's mistake against him. That is why he is a good friend and will make a good king. They were in the council chambers. The king's seat was empty. Roriger had informed the court and council upon their arrival that his father remained sick and tired, and needed time to rest and recover. King Aerys wasn't even seen. He was discreetly escorted to his chambers and remained under guard. They are there to protect the king from himself. Those were Roriger's instructions. Harrenhal has undone him, Arthur thought sadly of Aerys' spiraling state. Roriger's changes were not well received by Aerys' small council, but these lords could do little besides protest when he began to dismiss them to put forward his own men. Roriger had the backing of the castle garrison, the gold cloaks, the people in the city, and the many, many lords who had followed him from Harrenhal. The tents camped out around King's Landing were so large it seemed to make up its own little city. There was no hand of the king, but Roriger served its position in all but name. He even sat where the hand would sit. Lord Tywin Lannister had been hand when he arrived at Harrenhal. He left the tournament a traitor. Arthur had come to several of these meetings, but they still made him a mite uncomfortable. I feel like an imposter. He was a single knight amidst a group of powerful lords. They held great wealth, could call great numbers to Roriger's banner, and controlled large swaths of land to provide food. All I have is my sword and my vow. Princess Lila took the seat to Roriger's other side, who had sat quietly during his wife's outburst. It had not been her first and Arthur assumed it would not be her last. Lord Tyrell sat beside her. He was currently serving as Master of Laws, but Arthur knew it was the hand of the king title that he coveted. The Lord of Highgarden brought the might of the Reach with him and had been amply rewarded with the announcement that his first daughter would marry Roriger's son and heir, Aegon. There was no daughter to speak of at the moment, but that didn't concern Lord Tyrell. His wife was pregnant with their third child and he was confident that she would deliver him a daughter after already giving him 2 sons. You were too merciful on Connington. Princess Lila was the only one bold enough to go against her husband. The others at the table were always quick to agree or flatter, but the princess from Volantis was never shy to voice her displeasure nor at repeating it. Lord Connington made a mistake, Roriger said firmly, defending his absent friend. There were many mistakes made at Harrenhal. The Lord of Griffin's Roost had been sent to the Stormlands to retrieve Queen Rolla and Prince Viserys, who had already left Storm's End to make their return to King's Landing. His departure was a clear sign of the prince's dissatisfaction at how his friend handled Daeron's arrest. Arthur saw the slightest wince the princess made at this reminder. They were punished. The they that the prince and his wife were referring to were the newly revealed Golden Company mercenaries. Roriger presented them to the court upon his return to the capital. He had informed them all that the Golden Company had come to repent and serve their rightful ruler. Their sudden appearance and alliance had sent a ripple through court. Not everyone seemed convinced at Roriger's announcement, and Arthur knew many had families who had fought and died against the Golden Company. The War of the Ninepenny Kings was still fresh in some minds. In the end, Roriger's endorsement won the day. His goodwill shone brighter than the Golden Company's dark past. The mercenary company was not fully embraced, and some lords even left the capital because of it, but their numbers were few. The hard truth was if the Seven Kingdoms were plunged into war, the Golden Company were the best and most powerful mercenaries to be found. They brought numbers, experience, and talent that would be sorely needed. It was a begrudging admittance to some, but their reputation could not be denied. They were not alone in their surprise or their hesitance. Arthur too had trouble accepting them. He had known about them since before the tournament at Harrenhal when Roriger had revealed Blackfyr to him. His friend hadn't just shown him a sword but had told him of this new alliance with the notorious mercenary company. The sword had been surprising enough to Arthur, but this sudden alliance had him astonished. I swore to be his man, he had reminded himself. Roriger forgave and accepted them. His family had the strongest vendetta against them, so if Roriger can welcome them into the fold then he should too. I did, but it was still strange to see their colors worn so openly throughout the city and the Red Keep. They were sloppy. Roriger didn't withhold his judgment on what had occurred at Harrenhal. When plans and orders aren't followed through, he stopped himself. It is behind us. We must move forward. He sighed. I wish I didn't even need to plan for an occasion that would call my brother to betray me. A betrayal felt by many. Arthur wouldn't let his mind settle on the other betrayals that followed the prince. They were my brothers. And now they are gone. But you did. My prince Lord Mark Grafton had replaced one of Eyre's staunchest supporters, Lord Lucerys Valerian, as the new master of ships. The Lord of Gulltown was a stout man with short blonde hair and a thick moustache that he had curled at its tips. Arthur had seen him in the sparring yard, and Lord Grafton looked as comfortable in armor and with a sword as he does now, sitting and planning. Wisdom and strength. Lord Mouton quoting his own house words from his seat. The Lord of Maidenpool was a round man with mousy hair and red cheeks. He had been another one of Roriger's new appointments, serving as Master of Coin. You have shown both, my prince. Mace Tyrell shot an annoyed look that went unseen by the prince and princess. He clearly didn't want to be overshadowed. He forced your hand, my prince. Why else would he send Queen Rolla and Prince Viserys away? He was planning something. The Lord of Highgarden sounded more affronted at Prince Daeron's deeds than Prince Roriger. You only reacted accordingly. Lord Tyrell should change his standard to a fawn. Arthur kept that suggestion to himself. The fault lies solely on your brother, my prince, Lord Tyrell said. You're trying to serve the Seven Kingdoms while your brother is trying to steal them. His tone is honeyed, but his words aren't wrong. Arthur had wanted to believe they were. He kept telling himself they had to be. He knew of Daeron's distaste towards his brother, but he never thought this rivalry could spill out onto a battlefield, dragging the Seven Kingdoms with them. I was wrong. I was wrong about him. I was wrong about them. Lord Tyrell speaks truly. Husband. Princess Lila's words had the Lord of Highgarden beaming. Roriger turned his attention further down the table. Have we received any raven from the north? No, my prince acolyte Adam was currently serving as the acting Grand Maester since Pycelle had died in his sleep less than a fortnight ago. It was old age, Pycelle's acolytes declared after the autopsy. That made the matter settled to them, and a raven was sent to the citadel for a replacement. Pycelle was old, Arthur would admit, but he didn't seem that feeble when we left. He had no facts, so he let it go. He didn't think it was worth their attention, especially with such dark tidings on the horizon. I have enough to deal with and little time to do it all. Lord Stark will believe you, Princess Lila assured him. I've been told those, Crown, she frowned, struggling to say the word. Cranogman, Lord Mouton supplied kindly. Yes, them, Princess Lila said. I've been told that they are not very well regarded within the Seven Kingdoms. They are not, Lord Mouton agreed. You cannot blame yourself, my prince. Lord Tyrell was not one to be left behind. He was a traitor. He admitted as much. I have only a few birds in the north. My prince Lord Varys was the only member of Aerys' small council who Rhaegar retained. But I don't believe this death will stir much outrage, perhaps some blustering, but it would carry little bite. He giggled. The north doesn't seem interested in involving itself in southern matters. The eunuch is a strange man, but Arthur knew him to be loyal to Rhaegar. Better for them to remain in the north than take the chance they could side with your brother Lord Grafton's observation rankled some. They swore vows to the king. Lord Tyrell didn't seem bothered by the fact that the king wasn't present and hadn't been for some time. Shameful, shameful. He shook his head. Arthur yearned to be back in the sparring yard where the likes of Lord Tyrell wouldn't be able to flourish. The sword could not be coddled or flattered. You can't bribe to achieve the skill. It must be earned. What of your brother, my prince? Adam's apple in his throat bobbed. What of him? Rhaegar asked coolly. Do you believe he'll reconsider? The acolyte twitched at being under such scrutiny by the powerful lords around him. No. Rhaegar drummed his long fingers against the table. He is too infatuated with his Lannister betrothed. Betrayed his own brother for an expensive whore. The princess' tone was scathing. The lions have their claws in your brother and are trying to turn their newly made puppet into a king. He would not have worded it in such a disrespectful manner, but Arthur believed her point was right. If Prince Daeron had just accepted his brother's urging not to marry into the Lannisters, then there would be no conflict. But he knew deep down that the prince would never pick his brother over her. How much will be lost because of it? He chose a lion over the dragon, and now the kingdoms will surely bleed. The Lannisters are always wanting more. Lord Tyrell shook his head at their greed. Arthur saw Rhaegar raise his eyebrow while the corners of his mouth tugged upwards ever so slightly. He must have been the only one, but it was enough for a smile to come to his lips at seeing his friend's mood improve, even if he had to thank the Lord of Highgarden for it. Thank you, Lord Tyrell. The prince was able to smother his smile before turning to his staunch supporter. Lord Mouton, Lord Grafton. He inclined his head to them as he spoke their names. I pray your liege lords share your loyalty towards my family. Neither Lord Jon Arryn nor Lord Hoster Tully had accompanied Rhaegar to King's Landing after Harrenhal, but neither had they gone to follow Daeron into the west. They returned to their castles. Many of their bannermen didn't follow this example. Some of Lord Tully's most powerful vassals could be found camped out beyond the capital walls, including Daery, Went, and Mouton. While it was Lord Grafton and not the Warden of the East, Lord Arryn, who led a contingent of Vale Lords to King's Landing. He didn't know of betrothals or alliances. He didn't have any idea how to bring this lord or that into the fold. Arthur knew how to fight and he knew how to serve. That is what I swore to do, and I must see it to the end. Sir Jonathan Daery was injured in battle by Prince Daeron. He died of his wounds. Arthur thought it over more times than he could count. He even wrote it out to see how it would look before officially recording it into the White Book. He struggled with what else to say. Was it a battle? A skirmish? Knights didn't name the wars, they only fought in them. Sir Jonathan's injury had been bloody, but the Maesters thought he would recover. Then the wound festered, and the next thing Arthur knew was him being awoken in the middle of the night by a messenger from the acting Grand Maester informing him that Sir Jonathan was dead. He looked it over. The words stuck out to him as if they were written in blood instead of ink. The quill hovered over the page, but hesitance kept him from writing it into the book. This was permanent. He was the Lord Commander now. The guardian of the legacy of his sworn brothers. It was difficult enough to write out Lord Commander Hightower's death. It didn't feel right to see his handwriting on the pages. It was the Lord Commander's role to write down the stories and deeds of the knights that made up their order. And now the task is mine. Arthur would be lying if he did not think of one day taking the title, serving alongside his friend and king, but this was not the manner in which he wanted it. It was not supposed to come to pass like this. What of Sir Barristan? Arthur had asked when Rhaegar told him he'd be the new Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Sir Barristan has discarded his white cloak. Rhaegar had informed him, Sir Gawain has too. 2 of my brothers are dead, and 2 have deserted. Arthur still hadn't put in new entries for Barristan or Gawain. He wasn't sure he was quite ready to close their pages. The Kingsguard is sworn to the king. To defend him, to keep his counsel, to obey him. And here we are. I swore to serve Rhaegar over my king. And they swore to serve Daeron over their king. What sort of Kingsguard are we? We who chose the princes over the king. The sons over the father. Lord Commander. He looked up from the pages of the White Book. Princess Lila. He dipped her head to hide his frown. This is unexpected. He was in the round room within the White Sword Tower, and the last thing he was expecting was to host the princess. I do not wish to stay long. She seemed to sense her misstep. I wish to speak with you. Of course he didn't offer her place to sit at the weirwood table that stood between them. This is the table for my brothers, not trespassers. She didn't ask or choose to sit. She kept her attention at the decorations adorning the room, which included pale wool hangings. Lila took a few steps to look around. She tried to hide it, but he could tell that she wasn't impressed with the sparse conditions and bland colors. The room was awash with white, but after everything that had happened at Harrenhal, he felt black was more fitting. Mourning those who had fallen and those who had wandered. I heard about Sir Jonnet Hoare. She began awkwardly. He was a good knight. He deserved a better end. She stopped at the hearth. It wasn't the glow of the embers that had her attention, but the large white shield above it with 2 cross-long swords. To be killed by a man you were once sworn to protect. She turned back to him. That is a sad fate. He was a good knight. Arthur wouldn't say more. He was his brother, but he preferred to mourn in peace. He was. She agreed. I was going to speak with you even before hearing of his passing. Her attire was exotic, but her colors were familiar. She was swathed in crimson with elegant black bows and ribbons in elaborate designs. It looked as if one of the black ribbon outlines formed a dragon. I wanted to know if you had given my suggestion some thought. I have. He should have known that would be why she would seek him out. She wanted a white cloak for one of her mercenaries. The Golden Company is filled with accomplished men, he said carefully. They are, she replied, happily, and hopeful. Many of them are knights too. So I've been told. It was his duty to replenish the ranks of the Kingsguard. It was no easy task, especially with such tall shadows looming over the vacancies. There's no Hightower or Barristan to be found in the ranks of the Golden Company. Those are men of high quality and great talent. He had no doubt that these mercenaries were skilled, but they were killers and sellswords, and he wanted knights that could become white swords. It was not just Barristan and Lord Commander Hightower he needed to replace. There were 4 openings in total, 4 glaring spots that he was responsible for filling. He had compiled a list and had seen and spoken to some, but he still hadn't made any final decisions. I will need to soon. You've given me some names, he reminded her, and I shall look them over. I need to speak with them. I need to spar with them, he went on, seeing her pleased smile grow the more he went, looking convinced that he'd give one of those precious white cloaks to a golden cloak mercenary. Do you truly believe these men of wealth will trade their gold for poverty? We fight to serve. We die to protect. It isn't coin we live and die for, but our king and his orders. Not all sellswords are terrible men, Sir Arthur. She looked a little put off by his judgment. The company is filled with many who just wish to come home. That was why they fought. It is why they crossed the narrow sea. They wish to serve. He was not expecting such a vehement defense of these men's character. You are right, he admitted. Many men who took the white cloak were simple hedge knights who others thought were unsuited, but were proven wrong. I only ask that you consider them, Sir Arthur. I will, Princess. He was telling her the truth. I will give them their chance. Thank you. She tipped her head. She took a few steps towards the exit, but she didn't look to be in a hurry. Princess. He didn't wish to be rude, but he still had matters to attend to. They say you're the greatest swordsman in the 7 kingdoms, Sir Arthur. I do not say that. He brought his hands to rest on the edge of the table. There are many great swordsmen. He had the honor to fight and train among them, including Sir Barristan as well as Prince Daeron. He kept those thoughts to himself, believing they wouldn't be well received in present company. She gave him a tight smile. You speak of Prince Daeron and his friends. The prince travels in good company, Sir Arthur replied honestly. Prince Daeron, Sir Jaime Lannister, Prince Oberyn Martell, Robert Baratheon, the lord who killed his Lord Commander, Ned Stark too. It was the last name that made him pause, but it wasn't his talent that stilled him, but his relation. He's my good brother. He tried to stop the thought, but it still leaked through. Could I truly make my sister a widow if I faced her husband in battle? He hoped it didn't come to that. It couldn't. Including 2 turncloaks, the Princess Sourtone helped to dismiss his dark thoughts. Barristan the Bold, she scoffed. I suppose bold is an apt moniker for a knight who turned his cloak. It is certainly bold to commit treason. Her face darkened, but the storm in her eyes quickly passed and her expression relaxed. Forgive me, she apologized, my pregnancy has been challenging. Her hand was resting on the swell of her belly. Of course he wasn't a maester or a mother, so he knew little of such things. My husband trusts you, Sir Arthur. We need you. Her fingers were tracing one of the black ribbons along her red dress. Aegon needs you. What do you need? There will be battle. We all know it, and when it comes. We need you to be the one to fight him, Lila revealed. We need you to kill him. Who? Arthur asked, despite the sinking suspicion settling in his gut of who it was she was talking about. Who else? She smirked. The traitor, Daeron Targaryen. Rolla. Princess or prisoner? She often wondered what she really was when she was raised in the Red Keep. Her betrothal to her brother was no different to fetters, binding them against both of their wishes. I didn't have a choice. I didn't have a voice. Her parents cared more about the words of some witch than they did their own children. I was both, but was I the prisoner because I was a princess? Rolla Targaryen sighed. She was the queen of the 7 kingdoms, but in the heart of the Red Keep, she found herself more imprisoned than empowered. Since her return to King's Landing, she had seen little and had received few guests. One of the only blessings was that none of them were her husband. At least I'm away from him. It was a hollow victory because her other fears had been realized. They grew in her heart when she was sent away to the Stormlands. Their roots entangled in her chest. Her boys were moving against each other. My sons, she wanted to wail at the unfairness of it. Rhaegar, Daeron, my little joys in a lifetime of misery. The only solace in my marriage. The only light Aerys couldn't extinguish from me. She didn't cry when Lord Connington met them on the road to the capital. When he informed her of what happened at Harrenhal. She had made sure Viserys wasn't there or told. She saved her tears so no one could see them, but even then, there were only a few. I'm too wary to weep. She was determined not to mourn one of her sons. She could not let this come to pass. The good in her life cannot be undone. Every day she asked to see her son, and every day she was told he would come when he could. She learned that Rhaegar was all but ruling the 7 kingdoms. He appointed his own council, he put forward a new Lord Commander. The news of the splitting Kingsguard had sparked a cold dread that spread inside her, the dance. She tried to stomp it down. She wanted to push it away, but its foothold was too strong. The dance, Targaryen against Targaryen, Kingsguard against Kingsguard, the kingdoms against each other. It cannot happen, she wanted to shout. Please, no, she prayed, but the gods were silent. It was servants and guards who helped her, who gave her information, none she relied on more than Sir Alliser Thorne, who was retained as her sworn sword. A good and loyal man, she was grateful to still have him with her, especially with the losses the Kingsguard took. Lord Commander Hightower dead, she had known him since she was a girl. His large frame, draped in white, his presence used to be such a comfort to her when she was a princess. With him I felt safe. That innocence was snuffed when she became her brother's wife. Sir Jonnet Hoare not only died, but was slain by Daeron. This news was more shocking than the Lord Commander's death. My son, killing a guard who swore to protect our family. Rolla found herself in the dark and she hated it. Sirs Barristan and Quain went with Daeron, their defection brought her relief, but also sorrow. Relieved that her son wasn't alone, but if the Kingsguard were splitting she knew what could come next. She looked around her apartments that she had been moved to. She moved to sit on one of the plush sofas by the hearth. A small fire was going, but it was the comfort she wanted, not the warmth. Viserys was moved in rooms closer to her, and again she was thankful for this small gesture. Her youngest boy hadn't stopped playing with the new toys his good sister, Princess Lila, had gifted him when they returned. Wooden figures carved in the shape of the exotic elephant. Viserys was in awe of them, and quickly tried them out against his other wooden toys, which included dragons and soldiers and knights. A pleased Lila then promised him that if he was good he could see them for real. That had delighted Viserys, and she found her youngest son on his best behavior. Though it didn't stop him from asking after them and wondering when he'd get to see them. If it wasn't so dire, she'd found herself more amused at her son's antics, but it was hard to feel joy when she knew where those elephants came from and what they meant: the Golden Company. "My sons, what are you doing?" She closed her eyes. "Rhaegar, you'd rather side with our family's enemies than your own blood." "Mother." She blinked. Confused, but certain she heard a voice. She looked up to see her eldest was standing in the doorway. "Rhaegar," she rushed to him, wrapping her arms around him as soon as she could. The relief of seeing her son couldn't dam the restlessness or the anger that was fermenting inside her. "What is this madness?" she demanded, uncaring that he was the crown prince, the heir to the 7 kingdoms. He was her son, her boy, and she'd not shy away from such feelings despite the etiquette that was expected. Mother. Rhaegar removed himself from her embrace, but he kept one of his hands on her shoulders. "You have missed much." He gently nudged her to follow him back towards the couch. "I'm only doing what I can to protect the 7 kingdoms. Daeron isn't a threat to your reign." She felt his grip on her shoulder tighten, but it was an instinctive squeeze at the mention of his brother. A flicker of discomfort before his fingers released their hold on her. "He killed a knight in the King's Guard." Rhaegar didn't sit when she did. He stood in front of her, towering over her, a tall shadow that enveloped her sitting form. "He won't listen to the crown. He's dangerous. He's your brother." She wouldn't bend on her boys. "These are misunderstandings that can be mended." "Mother." There was pity shining in his purple eyes. "He's chosen his betrothed over his blood." She swallowed the first response she wanted to give. It was curt and brimming with anger. This frustration rattled within her. It was an unfair question to be asked. It was an unwise demand to be made. She kept her tone calm, smoothing over any unsteady feelings from rising. "The Lannisters are our allies. An agreement was made between your father and Lord Tywine to renege on a betrothal after a castle has been built." She paused, looking to her son, but the words seemed to miss their mark. "A single castle doesn't concern me. Look at his friends, they are threats. He doesn't sound like my Rhaegar, but Aerys. You refuse to see what is there, Mother." He turned his back on her. It was Daeron who made the first move. "Look at me, Rhaegar." She would not hear such an accusation from her son without looking him straight in the eyes. He obeyed. He then repeated it. Neither his tone nor his conviction wavered. "I'm sorry." He sounded to have meant it. "The Lannisters have poisoned him. They've planted these treacherous seeds in his resentment for me, and they have bore fruit." Rhaegar sagged in her seat. It felt as if she was drowning, desperately kicking to keep her head above the water as it crashed and swelled around her. The current trying to drag her down, but she kept fighting. "No," she said. "No." She said it louder, the heat of it catching Rhaegar off guard. "No, it will not end like this." She took to her feet. "Let me talk to him. I can give you peace." She took her son's hands in her own. "I can stop this. Daeron's betrayal has upset Father." Rhaegar began. "He is unwell, but he is still king. He despises the Lannisters, and despite his condition he has made his mind clear on this matter. I cannot give you peace when he demands punishment. This is your brother." She nearly snapped. "All I've been told since arriving is that you are ruling in Father's stead, and now you will not do this." "Him being my brother doesn't change his crimes," Rhaegar countered. He was calm and not upset. "I must tread carefully. I am leading, but I lead in my father's name, still not my own." She took his words without replying. Slowly, she thought through them. She wanted to believe him. This was her eldest son, the first of few blessings from her marriage. It was not like she could sit in on small council meetings, or petition for her orders to be given and then obeyed. "My crown is a gilded chain that keeps me tied to Aerys." At the mention of her brother's name, something small and cold bloomed inside her. Rippling across her mind, growing as it moved. Even as it spread, she did not say the words aloud. It was beginning to consume her, a dangerous spark whose flames burned beyond her control, because this couldn't be taken back. Once the words are spoken, they cannot be unspoken. Rhaegar Targaryen steadied herself. She didn't yield to the shiver that went through her. And what if he wasn't king? She asked as soft as spider's silk, beginning to weave a dangerous and deadly web. Silence. She saw little in her son's reaction. No disgust, no outrage, she noted, just a quiet stillness that stretched out between them. That would be a tragedy, Rhaegar finally said, and did so delicately, and if I was king I would consider it. Kinslayer, the cold voice whispered inside her, hungry and growing, no one is more accursed than a kinslayer. She swallowed the swell before it could form in her throat. That isn't good enough. She gripped her hands together to stop them from shaking. Woe to the kinslayer. They are damned. She didn't listen. Deliver me pain if this can deliver peace, she thought to the gods. If it were to come to pass, she began, allow me to mourn, allow me to travel to see my son, allow me a chance for peace. Rhaegar didn't answer her right away. His expression offered her no peek into his heart and thoughts. I'd give you my blessing to speak sense to Daeron. Swear it. She grabbed his arm, swear it to me. He didn't flinch. He looked down, meeting her gaze. I swear it, he said solemnly, by the old gods and the new. Our family's history is fire and blood. That night she paced in her chambers. How many times have we killed one another? Targaryen, Blackfyr, blood is blood. It was many, far too many. She stopped when she reached her looking glass. R'hllor inspected her appearance in the mirror, wearing a red gown that was nearly too large for her. I'm withering, frailer and smaller than what she had been in her youth. Her absence from her dear husband had allowed some of her old bruises to fade away. The lingering scars were more pale outlines than the angry red lines that he had unleashed on her in his bloody grip and hurtful squeezing. She touched some of her pale hair that had slipped away from her braid. It took her just a few seconds to fix. She then went to the top drawer of her desk, opening it and quickly spotting what she wanted. It was a gift from her grandfather, Aegon the Unlikely. She picked up the beautiful brooch. He was against my parents' marriage, and mine. She could still remember him when she tried hard enough. It was difficult to hold since the screams of Summerhall always bled into such memories. He didn't stop my father, but he still loved me. She looked down at the three-headed ruby-studded Targaryen dragon. It was hard to hate him like she hated her parents even when he gave them freedom that they denied her. She ran her thumb over one of the red dragon heads, it glinted in the candlelight. You are the blood of the dragon too, he had told her, he wanted me to be brave. She pinned it to her gun. I know what awaits me, and I accept it. With one last look, she turned away from her reflection and went to the door, grabbing a robe and slipping it on as she walked. She tied the cinch just before she reached the entrance. Your Grace. The two Targaryen guards greeted her. The king is expecting me. Of course, the one on the left said, before stepping aside to let her pass. She did. She heard their footsteps following her. A rhythm to the footfalls, she tried to focus on as her own feet carried her towards him. It was not a long walk, and standing outside the king's door was her knight, Sir Alisa. Your Grace. He didn't look surprised to see her. His dark eyes almost seemed to soften before he turned to the other guards. Thank you, he told them, I will see to it the Queen's safe return. The guards didn't argue. They weren't supposed to. They always listened to the orders of the King's Guard. They bowed their heads and left. Sir Alisa moved to the door, opening it for her, and then he stood aside. She walked in with her head held high. She didn't flinch when the door closed behind her. A noise almost animal-like greeted her arrival. A voice followed, who's there? She shuddered. Ignoring the pinpricks that seemed to pierce her flesh at hearing his voice again. She didn't stop. R'hllor moved forward. Your wife. Her eyes were on the four-poster bed, its curtains were partly opened, but he was still out of view. My wife. It sounded like a purr, come closer. She did. She couldn't see him in the darkness. She could only hear him. She stood still, her hands at her sides. She refused to cower. She untied the cinch of her robe, shrugging it off, the cloth cooled at her feet. The cold air tickled her skin. She took a breath. I heard you were unwell. She spoke to his shadow, I've come to serve. Serve? She didn't need to see him to know he was sneering. She knew her brother too well. My little wife. She saw his long nails first. A gnarled hand followed as it gripped one of the bed poles. He pulled himself into the light and it took all of her control not to step back in fright. More monstrous than man. His hair was stringy, falling around his face. His beard was longer than she remembered, disheveled and bushy. His face was gaunt, his eyes dark and sunken. His lips were chapped, and when he opened them to smile, she saw his yellow, rotting teeth. His tongue flicked out of his mouth like a serpent, wetting his lips. She felt his gaze on her skin. Like the peeling of a fruit with a knife, thin and cutting, pulling back to see more, to get more. You're the mother of a traitor, he snarled. Daeron betrayed me. He jabbed a finger in her direction. The fingernail was yellowish, and cracking, long and curled. You turned him against me. She wanted to shout. She wanted to lash out at him, curse him for what he did to her children, but she couldn't. Her defiance would be met harshly. She could not show him her strength yet. He must see me as he always has, docile and dim. I don't serve my sons, she said, I serve my husband. She posed herself to look more enticing. Her revulsion bubbled within, but she kept it from spilling onto her expression. It threatened to crack when she knew it was working, seeing how he was taking her in. Give me strength. You serve me, he said, sounding as if he was tasting the words, mulling their meaning while his eyes continued to look her over with the hungry glint of a starving predator. Yes, he bobbed his head, hair falling this way and that. Yes, his voice cracking with glee, my dear, loyal wife. He raised a clawed hand, beckoning to her, come, and I'll reward you. My husband is kind. She was demure, dipping her head before curtsying, angling herself to expose more of her flesh to him. I serve at his pleasure. Can you hear my heartbeat? She wanted to ask him, as she made her way to him. It's the call of battle. It draws near. He pushed himself off her like a drunken beast, falling onto his back and letting out a satisfied moan. He was spent and sated. He was mumbling happily to himself. She didn't move. She ached from his touch. He wasn't gentle, but mercifully it was quick. She could feel the warm trickle of blood from where his nails dug too deep into her skin. She waited in the dark, hearing his raspy breath as it slowly calmed into a steady noise which she knew meant he was finally asleep. Rolla slipped out from under the blanket, careful in her movement, pausing when she was off the bed. She stopped and she waited, but her husband didn't stir. He only snored. She padded across the room, tentatively she moved, not wanting to disrupt him. When she reached the door, she let out a tired breath. She opened the door, nudging just enough so she could speak, not wishing for the light of the corridor to flood her room. Sir Alisa, she whispered even though she couldn't spot him. Yes, Your Grace. He stepped into view. The king has requested I stay with him for the night. Very well, Your Grace. Sir Alisa didn't object. He served at the king's behest, not hers. He may have been her sworn sword, but she could not turn and point him at her husband. This is my fight, not his. If that is his desire. It is. She didn't wait for him to answer before she shut the door. When it closed, she pressed her back to it and looked to see he was still sleeping. Sometimes you must cut a hand or a foot to save the body. That was what she was doing, severing a limb to stave off an infection. She was nearing the bed. Was there anything more rotten and dangerous than my own brother? She was closer. I'm saving us. She reached out and cautiously grabbed one of her pillows. If this will save my sons, then I'll accept whatever cursed fate and terrible wrath awaits me. Stitched into the curtains of their bed were patterns of the three-headed dragon of their house. She could almost feel their eyes on her as she moved into position. She had a firm grip on the pillow. Even in his madness he couldn't see me as a foe. I couldn't be a threat. It was just over his head, but still, he didn't open his eyes. It was only the red-sewn dragons who watched her. You forgot, brother. She pressed the pillow down over his face. I'm a dragon too. In the course of a week she attended a funeral and a coronation. Aes was dead. May he burn in the seven hells for all eternity. You will burn too, a voice was quick to remind her, to condemn her, but she'd gladly sacrifice her life to protect her sons. Aes' madness threatened to cull their entire family, so she did what needed to be done. I did it for them. I had to. She reasoned with herself, what else was she to do? She had dreamed of the day Roriga would be king when he was just a small babe in her arms. She prayed to the gods to protect him, to give him wisdom, to give him strength to endure his father, to give him a mind unblemished with madness. She wished for it so long because her boy's coronation would mean she was safe from Aes, that her brother was dead, and she was beyond his torturous grasp. Rolla played the mourning widow at her brother's funeral. There was no suspicion of her brother's death. Why would there be? She was the timid wife, who shrieked when she awoke the next morning to discover Aes cold and unresponsive. Babbling when the guards and knights came in. Frantic when the acolytes inspected his body. An act that was hard to play when she waited with what they would say. Would they cry murder? Kinslayer. Kingslayer.